Okay. You can go now.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Donnie Winston. I am an independent research data engineer. I run a little consultancy company. I'm here with Kogen Shimizu, who's also on the call, who's a professor, expert in semantic technologies. And we're here to talk about a NASA program called TOPS-T. It's towards open science training that hopefully many of you have heard of. And in particular, a module, an initiative of it to advance a science core open science curriculum for heliophysics in particular as one of NASA's science mission directorates, and how this might relate to you all at PyHC in that community. So I'll throw in some links, but a little bit of background here. If any of you aren't on this forum, I suggest you look into it, apply to it. It's a great, it's called helionauts.org. It's a nice open source discussion forum, self-hosted. And I was working with Kogen and with Ryan McGranahan and several others on this vocabulary camp for heliophysics at NASA Goddard. And part of what happened is how can we amplify the momentum from that? We discovered this NASA TOPS-T program, which I'll get to in a minute. And what was wonderful is Julie was on there and reached out to me to talk to you all. So that's sort of why I'm here, why I know about PyHC. I'll link a little bit more for people who aren't as familiar with the TOPS-T program. So this was announced recently. It's essentially training to help advance appreciation of open science and open science methods, very broadly, starting from interested undergraduate students up to seasoned researchers, just the power of open science methods, and in particular the use of cloud-based data sets that NASA has open and wants to be open. So this program has a bunch of things. There's nice summer schools, an initiative to help teach the general open science curriculum, open core curriculum, as well as virtual cohorts. And the other effort here is this so-called science core curriculum that should complement existing training materials about open science methods, but very particular to science mission directorates. So you can see, there are a bunch of things that are focused on maybe marine sciences, other things, environmental sciences. And down here, we have me. I was able to snag an initiative for heliophysics, and that's what we're talking about today, and how we're going to do that. In the interest of being open about it, I'll certainly talk about it, but I also want to give you all a link to our proposal. So if you go here, this is the proposal. It resolves to this link that I'm sharing, but I wanted to be fancy and show you all that I can make a persistent identifier, and so you can share that. So this is, I'm basically going to be going over this today and taking questions in a little bit, a high-level overview. But this is what we submitted to NASA. This was approved, and this sort of tells you about our plan over the next year and then year after that. So you can sort of get a sense exactly of what we propose to do. As another supplement, I'll throw in here, I'll be referring to this a little bit, hopefully throughout my talk, but it sort of outlines a bit of my my thought about machine actionability and the FAIR principles, and a way of sort of weaving a lot of that into our pedagogy. Okay, so let me just get back to here. So I essentially have a copy of the proposal in front of me, and I'm going to be walking over salient elements of it. And I'll try to keep an eye on the screen as well. Maybe I'll give an overview and then we'll sort of take questions. I don't want to impact the rest of the session. So I know that even though we started late, I'd still like to hopefully stop in 13 minutes to not allow things to go overboard. So I'll just hit some of the high notes here. So our big objectives are number one, showcase notebooks. So a lot of you are familiar with this idea of literate programming and the notebook paradigm of an executable narrative as exemplified by Jupyter. And so we want to make showcase notebooks that are essentially going to be hosted on the NASA GitHub, and also should be openly accessible to people. For the duration of the project, we plan to host some infrastructure like a Binder Hub or Jupyter Hub. We're also definitely interested in getting in touch with the Helio Cloud people to see, some hosting during the project or afterwards. But essentially develop some showcase notebooks where the purpose of it is not necessarily to showcase your particular research like you might do for a particular paper, but really to introduce someone who's generally interested in maybe learning more about heliophysics and methodology using an open science lens, and being able to explore NASA cloud data sets. So that's one thing. The other big thing that's part of our approach, Koganai's approach, is to bootstrap a knowledge graph. Perhaps some of you are aware of this terminology. It's gone by the guise of semantic web graph. You've maybe heard of linked data, semantic web. Essentially, it's a way that Koganai feel opinionated approach to realizing fair in practice, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data in practice. And we'd like to sneak in an appreciation not just of open science methods, but of these semantic knowledge representation methods and knowledge graph approaches, in particularly a persistent identifier centric approach. So we're going to be trying to bring together various PIDs that are in existence, like ORCIDs and research organization registry identifiers for people and organizations, DOIs for data sets and literature, IGSNs for samples, RAIDs for research activity identifiers, etc. We want to plug people into this PID ecosystem to help them get their data interoperable, and with a focus on doing this with heliophysics. And the final thing is just to advance appreciation of open science methods. And so that's a big thing that we want to do. And this is, I think, in the showcase notebook, certainly, but in terms of advancing appreciation, here's where a lot of kind of UX and accessibility comes in, where partly in our proposal, we mentioned we want to have some workshops, maybe carpentry style, and also make sure to provide some libraries that help people get access to this stuff. We don't want to just be using the Python request library and doing bare HTTP requests with headers. We'd like people to use libraries, and so the PyHC community will be great with this sort of thing in terms of being able to make this accessible and essentially being able to highlight your work and your efforts to a more general audience. Just in terms of how this might look, the only other thing, I'll draw this quick diagram from our proposal, just in terms of the architecture of how this thing will work. Number one, at the bottom, we're going to have the data sets, and these presumably exist. They're sort of available in the cloud, but people aren't necessarily using them. They may not know how to use them unless you're a specialist. But in terms of someone more broad who doesn't know necessarily about heliophysics or the data sets, accessibility might be hampered somewhat. So the ultimate goal is we want these nice Jupyter notebooks. And this project is about, at least in the Helio space, getting from here to there. One of the things that we'd like to do is build some APIs, any convenience functions that are needed for caching, that sort of thing. I'm personally trained in web development, backend development. So I'm excited to do this sort of thing and make things more accessible, but also just become aware of and catalog the different APIs that are out there and how to present them effectively. And the other aspect of this that's kind of parallel to this, but also complementary, is doing this knowledge representation effort where we're going to build up essentially a schema by taking existing vocabularies and harmonizing them and coming up with new ones based on what people think is relevant. And this is important because if someone's new to the field, rather than having to read a whole thing about what a coronal mass ejection is, what reconnection is, all these other things, we want these terms that happen in the data to essentially be represented as URIs, where people can go and load them up and look at them Wikipedia style, Wikidata style, but make sure things are connected in a user-friendly way. So it's going to help with the learning process. That's our hope. On top of this, we can filter through this organized schema the actual knowledge graph. And so apart from a self-service API where someone knows what they're getting and they know the names of the resources, this is going to provide a very general search through the knowledge graph. Some of you might be familiar with the Sparkle query language, but essentially being able to do broad graph search based on the schema elements. And so we not only want to advance an appreciation of the data sets, but also through effective knowledge representation as a mechanism for pedagogy. So I wanted to leave some time for questions. Oh, let me look over here. So there's 5 minutes left. I'll maybe stop here and start looking into the chat, and then I'll maybe take hands from the audience. Ryan asks, any plans to use RAID? Yes, that's on our list. To do. And there's a great webinar. I'll see if I can put the link somewhere. I don't know it now, but one of the progenitors of RAID, Sean Ross in Australia, has given a great intro webinar, I think maybe in a week or so, on this. But yeah, we definitely plan to use RAIDs as part of this. Okay, so again, I've sort of condensed this a lot in order to accommodate people's time. So maybe just 5 minutes left on the half hour. I'd be happy to just open it up for general questions to maximize. You could read the thing, but maybe if you just have questions for me or Kogan right now about that.
Yeah, hi, Donnie, can you hear me? This is John Vandegrift.
Hi, yes.
Oh, great, yeah. Very interesting stuff. So I didn't even know this was happening. So this is great to know that a heliophysics specific set of these is being done. I got lots of questions. So,
great.
And comments. We have about 150 scientists, data scientists at my institution that will need this training. So we're hoping to get some people trained early as like trainers. So is there a train the trainer process, and how do we get plugged into that?
Great question.
We can chat offline if that makes sense, but about that.
Sure. Currently, yeah. There's not a train the trainers program. There's just sort of a general training program, but we have budget for having people assist in the training. So I imagine that would be kind of part of that. So we would almost train the trainers during training itself. But yeah, what we plan to have is 6 sessions per year. That's going to be sort of an online event that's going to be about delivering notebooks for usability testing to people. And essentially, we're going to be trying to teach them to people. And I think people could definitely sign up for helping with that to learn how to deliver them.
Okay, because what we're thinking of doing too is adapting the training materials that TOPS makes or that you make and adapting them to our institution, because there's certain ways of doing open source that are specific at institutions. Here's the intellectual property people to talk to. Here's what you have to tell them. Here's what you have to put in your proposal. Here's how you go through the release process. Here's what's easy. Here's what isn't. There's a lot of details that I think we'd like to mix in with that as the data science people help train the science people at our institution.
Great. Okay. Well, one thing I'll point to, just in terms of maybe not train the trainers, but we do have a plan specifically for training material reuse and interoperability. Part of in the proposal, you'll see we have this idea of creating modules that are very self-contained and small, and essentially our showcase notebooks, the lessons are going to be a succession of these modules. And these modules should be sort of as small as possible. So the idea is if you have some kind of training you want to do, you might compose a lesson based out of these modules rather than having to take a giant lesson and do it. So that we at least have that idea behind it. And yeah.
And when are the when is the heliophysics? I think the TOPS material is a little bit delayed, right? It's going to be beta tested this summer and released in the fall. Is that what I heard right? Or
I believe so. The sort of generic TOPS open science curriculum. Yeah.
And what's the time frame then for your heliophysics specific elements?
Right. So we plan to get started second week of June. The idea is we want this to build on, but essentially we'll be seeking people who, so PyHC is great for this, but essentially people who have maybe gone through what we would imagine would be the equivalent of the NASA Open Core trainings, people who are a bit familiar with science methods and basic programming to do some of this stuff. And so we plan to get on this right away before the fall. And hopefully sync back up with the open core curriculum as our grant is for 2 years. So hopefully things will sort of sync up, but we're not going to wait until the open core curriculum is released in order to build on our stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I should probably yield the mic because I've got more questions because I'm also involved with Helio Cloud and I'm involved with Happy, one of the APIs that's in there. So we should definitely sync up at some point because especially if you're going to be doing programming and backend development and cloud accessibility of data, we should work together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Yeah. This is sort of, I'm just starting to tell people about it. I'm very happy I got invited to talk here, and I wanted to not really get started until it's official in a few weeks. But yeah, absolutely. Let's get connected. Let's not reinvent wheels. And so we can just focus on developing training, and if you can help with infrastructure and essentially make it last beyond this 2-year thing, that's fantastic. Okay.
Just want to say that we have like more minutes than this to continue conversation and questions. So continue.
Great. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask the session organizer. Yeah, maybe just cut us off. So yeah, go ahead until we get cut off by a moderator. Anyone else who has some questions, I'll go ahead and check the meeting chat.
Yeah, since we started 10 minutes late, I just shifted the schedule 10 minutes. So you have until 9:40. Rebecca had a question as well in the room.
I'm holding the mic. Maybe not a good idea, but hi, this is Rebecca. We were chatting on Helionauts. I don't know if you caught part of that presentation yesterday about the Open Science Executable project, but that's definitely a really good place we could coordinate together on that infrastructure development.
Yes.
You should probably include me with these meetings with John, at least for that aspect of it.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning this on the Helionauts forum. Yeah, absolutely. This is great. Thank you. I'm in.
Hi, this is Nick Murphy from Plasma Pi. So I go between like heliophysics and plasma physics and a little bit of like fusion energy. And I'm kind of wondering about chances for continuing this work or spreading it to especially the fusion energy community because we really need it there. So yeah, how possible would it be to move this across disciplines, or at least some aspects of it?
Yeah, so that's, part of my interest in doing this, and I believe Kogan's as well. We sort of we got keyed in to Helio stuff through Ryan and the vocamp, but because of our knowledge representation focus, we're very, very interested in interoperability. And so we already sort of have this view towards wanting this to not be a silo and be able to reach across to different things. So it would be excellent to have people on board from adjacent scientific communities, just to ensure that what we're building is general and can be transposed. In particular, it'd be wonderful to have people like you as part of our usability sessions for the notebooks, because it would be nice to have people who are not necessarily knee deep in the Helio, who are basically trying to learn a little bit of it, but coming from their perspective and can already see how it might map to theirs, and sort of make the connections points more explicit. So NASA is definitely interested in this as well. Kogan has his hand up. I believe he has a point to add.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of like the point in many ways, the broader point Donnie has already kind of gone over, but the semantic representation and knowledge representation aspect of this is meant to be sort of build a generalized core process for helping link and demonstrate how you can link data to standardized taxonomies and these persistent identifiers. And then we're focused particularly on the heliophysics use case because that's where we know people, and got to know people through Ryan and others. And so, as Donnie just said, being able to draw on the expertise of people, especially during development, will ensure that we don't kind of leave out or add gaps to the semantic side. It should be not easy, but very straightforward to ensure generality, especially if we approach the problem from a general perspective in the first place.
So I have questions about the knowledge graph and the schema piece, just in terms of kind of the science use cases. What do you envision that being used for, in terms of, the kinds of elements that you're talking about, and also in the larger heliophysics science community?
Sure.
That's kind of for you and for the room as well, or anybody. It's like, well, okay, these things are, we're trying to link things that haven't been linked before. And Ryan and I have talked about this, and things are being linked from heliophysics to other things. And Ryan keeps pointing out to me that this is becoming more and more important. And what are the practical things that we're trying to do with that? I think if we get to an understanding of that, more people can kind of join in on it.
I agree. I'm gonna quote from one of the paragraphs of my proposal right now, so I don't have to misremember it. But the idea is the knowledge graph can empower computer systems that in many aspects surpass the analytical capabilities that a typical human specialist has in their area of study. And unlike neural network models, the KG is human readable and explainable. One can use it as a reference data structure, correct it, govern it, publish it, etc. This is expected to allow more automation in scientific data management and to lower data preparation efforts needed for AI projects across NASA that pertain to heliophysics and space weather. So it's really hoped to be a support system. And one thing that you bring up about, well, it's nice to have something a bit more concrete. So that's I think a big part of what we want to accomplish here and keep in mind is essentially these training materials are going to involve actual data sets, and people can see like, oh, I'm getting this thing, and oh, it's nice that I was able to harmonize it and make sense of it through this PID graph, and here's a plot that makes sense to me, and I can record this stuff. Okay, I see how this is useful in this little toy problem now, and oh, I see how this is useful in this other little toy problem. So really making that visceral, I think, is a big part of that, and a big part of this project is making people kind of see it and appreciate it. So I agree that that's an outstanding challenge that is really focal to this. Kogan?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that. As Ryan said in the chat, knowledge graphs are becoming more and more useful, especially outside of this. It's just kind of a general trend amongst a lot of the knowledge-based trajectory, I guess, tends to be moving a little bit towards semantically enriched knowledge bases, which tend to take then the form of a knowledge graph. So what this allows you to do, if you're using the same sort of technologies and techniques, is if you build your own knowledge graph within your own particular domain, you can much more easily link out to other people's data sets or the descriptions of their own domains in order to get a sort of richer context for certain things. I think this became particularly evident at the vocamp that Ryan organized last year, because we were drawing from so many different disciplines that kind of had different ways of speaking about things. And with a knowledge graph, you can also encode disagreements and the context of the disagreement, but still agree that you're talking about the same thing. There's mechanisms for doing that, and that allows you to have it doesn't lock you into just using the same word, though that's still frequently probably the best case, but there's a whole bunch of wider context that the knowledge graph approach can help for you.
Yeah, I think my challenge for people working on this is still that practical piece, right? What is it? Because if we're going to connect that all the way into PyHC applications or, heliophysics applications that could then talk to industry applications or something, I don't see that happening in the next step or the next step. It's still, because I can't see the path, how it's going to connect in a technical basis. So I think building those use cases, I think we do need this, but I think it's for the scientists that I talk to, they can't see that at all, right? And they're busy on their own problems. They haven't thought about necessarily connecting too much to other domains. And I haven't seen any PyHC projects that are like, what we really need is the semantic connection to other domains. I think we're still kind of far from that. But so that's why I would love to see use cases so that we can get more excited about it. Rebecca's got her hand up. I'm passing the mic.
But
John, you forgot the paper. So there's a paper that, well, I'm part of PyHC, so in my mind, it's related. So there's a paper with a bunch of use cases called Liked, and Ryan was on that paper. But go dig in and pick your use case and go for it. It's on the heliophysics infrastructure and particularly the semantic stuff.
okay, final comment while I get the next thing set up. Go ahead, Nick. Never mind, that was the final comment. Thank you again, Donnie, for coming and presenting on this. Would love to have you back to keep having more conversations in the future, maybe on a PyHC telecon or something to that effect. So let's keep in touch.
Sounds great. And I'm now on the PyHC Slack for people who are on that. Feel free to DM me there about this.
If you'd like, I can get you added to our mailing list as well.
Yeah, just however you can figure out how to contact me or Kogan, do it so we can,
Perfect.
get involved in this. All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thanks again. All right, Leah, we are going to have a presentation on PyOpenSci now for the community. How just present. Yeah. Yeah. In theory. Sean, are you used to Dell? Wait, present. Okay, except I want it on that screen. Well, please. Oops. Oh my gosh. Cool. All right, and then I will get that shared for you. Boop. Okay, can everyone see Leah's slides? Online.
I can see him.
Thank you, Sandy. All right.
Okay, can everyone hear me? All right, great. Thank you, Nick. Okay, I have to look up here. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today. I am representing PyOpenSci. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that is. I'm the executive director and founder of this organization. And how do you, of course, 1 second, I can do slides. What did you hit to go
That's
next?
a great question. Up and down.
Up and down. Okay, can I handle a PowerPoint? I'm here to talk to you about software. So I am going to talk to you a little bit about our work in the open science and open source software space, and a little bit about our work in the packaging space for Python. And then finally, our work with peer review of open source software, which is really our core program for PyOpenSci. A little bit about me. I have a background in remote sensing ecology. I've built 2 other data intensive science programs. So this is the 3rd program or organization that I'm working on. One was at NEON, which is actually here in town in Boulder. It's an ecological observatory. The other was actually here at CU Boulder. I used to work over in Seek. So this is kind of home. And I've been in this space for a pretty long time. And if any of you do use Strava, I also maintain a Python package that lets you grab Strava data from their API. So PyOpenSci is all about building diverse community around the open source tools that drive open science. And we do that through peer review, training, and mentorship. And today I'm going to really focus on the peer review and the software piece of things. We were founded in 2018. We started peer review in 2019. And then we just launched as an independent organization this past fall. So we got funding. So I'm able to be here and talk to different groups about the work that we're doing. This is just a glimpse into our leadership structure. So we've got an advisory council. And so we've got a lot of community-driven leadership that's driving the decisions that we're making as an organization around software and peer review. And then this is our core team right now. So I'm the main core staff, Juanita Gomez, if you're familiar with the Scientific Python project, she's also working with them. And then we have a community manager that's starting in August. So this is a little bit off the screen. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay. So I'll kind of fill in the blanks when things get cut off here. But we're all about supporting open reproducible science. So we're talking about this idea of research that is research that everyone can build on top of with fully transparent methods. And of course, that type of science and research really isn't possible without open source software, right? Because but with a caveat, right? Open source software that actually works, that's maintained, that's documented, that people can use. So that's the caveat. But open source software is driving this effort. We've got this leveling of the playing field. People don't have to purchase licenses. They don't need funding for it. We've got this element of reproducibility that it allows where anyone can install the tools and use it, whether it's cloud, HPC, or local machine. It just enables this open, truly reproducible workflows. But there's a lot of challenges, especially when we're thinking about research and science in terms of using open source. One of the things we see in the Python landscape is you often will find packages that may or may not be maintained. Maybe there's different versions of them at different states of maintenance. maybe the quality of the documentation isn't high enough quality that someone can just get started using the package and they have to dig into the code and figure things out. So this can slow people's workflows down. And then sometimes that's just not a beginner-friendly experience. If you're newer to this ecosystem and want to get started, that can be really hard for people to navigate if the documentation isn't great. There's also this really interesting tension between people that are developing the tools that are volunteers, that are really working hard on these tools, and then the users. They find bugs, users get frustrated, they go to the maintainers, and there can just be some tension because they don't understand, the community doesn't always understand that we were talking about volunteers who love open source and are building tools for other people to use. And then the final truth is that creating a Python package is really tricky. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of tools. A lot of people don't know where to start. Standards are always kind of changing. And so that can be really, really frustrating for people as well. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the work that we've been doing around Python packaging, because that's just been kind of a sore subject for a lot of folks. And so we decided to develop a community-driven guidebook that we're working on with some other organizations that will help people make decisions about Python packaging without needing to be experts on packaging, which I think is really important. So again, what package tool do I use? What build backend? What is a build backend? How do I create the package? Like, these are the types of questions that we see all the time and get asked all the time. So what we've been doing on the packaging front is we're working with a lot of organizations, both within the scientific Python ecosystem, but also just across the Python ecosystem. So PyPA is the Python Packaging Authority. We've been talking with some of the core developers for Python. We're talking with Conda Forge maintainers and Conda. And so all of these different people that have skin in the game, that are working on some of these tools and some of these ecosystems, these are the people that have helped us develop, review, and publish our packaging guide. So this is really a truly community-driven effort. This is just an example of a review that's open right now. You can go to our GitHub, PyOpenSci GitHub, and you'll see the packaging guide repo. So we have these pull requests where we develop the content around Python packaging. And then here you can see this is a PyPA and Conda, Anaconda actually employee. And then this is someone from Conda Forge, Felipe, both amazing people. And they're reviewing this content to make sure that like we have the right information about according to like what they've been working on. The packaging guide itself, so this is like our workflow for how we're developing the content. So we start with these initial conversations, whether it's the tool maintainers or whoever is like the expert in that area. We develop the content, and then we have these rounds of open review where lots of people review the content. And sometimes it's like several hundred comments that I'm kind of working through, and we're trying to come up to consensus of like, what are the best tools for people to be using? What are the best workflows right now? So if you want to check this out, it's on our website, pyopensci.org, and it's just Python package guide. It's underway, it's in progress. And if anyone here is excited about reviewing this type of content, we'd welcome other reviewers for future pull requests. This is just a little diagram, not little, it actually was a lot of work, but looking at all of the build tools and all of the front end packaging tools and trying to help people understand, like, how do we make a decision? Like, do we want to use Flit or Hatch, or do we want to use PDM, or like what tools? And so there's a whole chapter or a whole page on packaging tools that helps you understand like what are the different features of each tool and how would you pick one of those tools for your specific use case. And this is just an example of like some of the tables that we have that start to lay out comparing the different tools to help you make those decisions. And then there's more details about each tool within the guide as well. So that's our packaging work. That's the work that we're doing to try to unify the ecosystem, the scientific ecosystem. So we're using similar tools and similar approaches, and people aren't spending so much time trying to figure out how to make some of those decisions. The next thing I'm going to talk to you about is our peer review process. So we do peer review, open peer review of scientific software. That's our focus. Python is our focus. I'm curious if anyone here has heard of rOpenSci. Do you? Any? Okay, cool. Yeah, so there's a sister organization that's called rOpenSci that's been around for some time, but I'll tell you about us in the Python ecosystem. This is our current editorial board. We're growing that as we get new submissions to our process. And David Nicholson is our editor-in-chief right now. What's really important in our process is that it's not just about peer review, but it's about community and specifically diverse communities. So we want to make sure that we're getting people from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different gender identities, lots of different cultural backgrounds. We've got people from around the world. And so we're actually very specific when we put together our reviewer teams to make sure that we're inviting people from different backgrounds to participate in our community and in our peer review process. And then similarly, for people that are newer to code review, but they want to get involved, code review is a really good skill to have just as a data scientist. It can actually help you improve your coding by just looking at other people's code. And so we offer mentorship as well to help people that are newer to the space that might want to get involved in code review. This is an example of a review. This is a review that was accepted a few years ago, but I just wanted to highlight that the review itself happens on GitHub. So it's fully open. And you can see this is the very top of the GitHub issue. And there's information about the package, about who's the editor, who are the reviewers, that kind of metadata for every single review. So you can look at any of our reviews that have happened and see the full history of how that review went. This is the structure of what a review looks like. So what happens at the beginning is there's a submission step where someone either submits a pre-submission inquiry that really is about asking, are we in scope? Is this package in scope for our process or for our organization? So we really focus on scientific packages, not general packages that are more broadly serving the greater Python community. And in that initial step, there's a lot of checks that happen by our editor-in-chief that are just core Python best practices. So we're looking for things like README files, code of conduct. Is there a contributing guide? Is there a license? So there's a whole checklist that we look at that will initially help that package maintainer improve their package, even if they don't go through review, to just have the core things that a Python package needs. And this is just an example. Now, don't get overwhelmed by all the text here, but what I want to highlight, this is comments in GitHub for a package that has been accepted. And in the pre-submission part of this review, this was PyTony, and the maintainer is talking to our editor-in-chief about various elements of their package. So for example, this package still was using a setup.py file, which has been, we're kind of moving away from that structure and packaging. And we're moving towards a PyProject TOML file. Don't worry about the details, but essentially what this was doing was a conversation like, hey, you could move your package into a slightly different structure, and then you're following modern best practices. And this happened at the pre-submission step. And so through that, he was able to update his infrastructure. We moved the documentation to Sphinx so he could set up automated builds and we could kind of test that docs were building. And then at the end, they also had some issues with installing the package across platforms. So we were able to help with that as well. We've got folks from Conda Forge in our organization. So that was really helpful. This is a Conda specific package. The point of this being that in these early steps of pre-submission, the package often gets reviewed, even if it doesn't move on to the full review process. So that's really valuable. But then comes the review. If a package has already gone through this pre-submission step and gets to review, they're pretty likely to be accepted because at that point they have all the basic checks, they've passed those checks. And now this becomes a conversation between an editor, two reviewers, and the package author about the usability of the package, the documentation, the technical infrastructure, the features of the package. We like to have one reviewer that's very domain specific that can provide that level of granular feedback about the package. But then we also like to have a second reviewer that may or may not be domain specific, but might be able to look at the technical elements of the package or maybe the usability of the package and that kind of thing. Once this happens, this is again all about constructive feedback and supporting maintainers, not about tearing people down in a review process. And once this happens, now the package is a part of our PyOpenSci ecosystem. So what does that mean? Essentially, they become a part of our community. We're going to provide support to the maintainers over time. We're going to check in to make sure that tool is still maintained. If it's not maintained, we're going to either try to help them find new maintainers if they have to step down, or gracefully sunset the package. Maybe it's end of life, and that does happen sometimes. And the maintainer always owns the tool. We don't own the tool. We're just a community that's going to provide support. Now, the last thing that's really important to highlight is we also have a partnership with the Journal of Open Source Software. So what that means is that if your package is accepted by us, JOS will accept our review as theirs. So you don't have to go through another review. They will review your paper, and now you can also get a JOS publication through our process. So that gives you an additional layer of citable entity. They offer cross-ref DOIs, so that will be attached to your ORCID ID and to all of the maintainers' ORCID IDs that are on the paper. And so that partnership really can be a win-win for anyone that's thinking about submitting to JOS. Finally, one of the things that we try to do is a Python scientific organization is we try to promote packages through social media. We have an online catalog of packages. It's small but growing. So we've got about 15 packages right now that have been accepted. We've got another 5 that are under review, another 2 that were actually 3 that were just submitted. So our package ecosystem is growing. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but we're also starting to roll out partnerships with community organizations. Make sure am I okay on time? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the partnerships next. So what we've been doing, we've partnered with Pangeo. We're talking to AstroPy right now, and there's an open GitHub issue. If anyone wanted to check it out, I could share it. And Nick might know what I'm talking about from Slack, yeah. So essentially what we're doing is we're adding layers of support for communities that have sets of packages that they're interested in becoming affiliated packages with their community. And AstroPy is an example of one that already has a list. Pangeo has this exact list as well. And they were having a really hard time like maintaining that list and keeping it up to date with what packages are still maintained, what packages are still following Pangeo standards. And so what we added to our review to kind of support this model is on top of our standards around packaging and best practices across domains, we added a layer of Pangeo specific standards. And if we end up partnering with AstroPy, we'll probably do the same with them. So Pangeo was interested in things like how packages interface with Xarray and Dask and how files are opened and lazy loading and lots of different specific, actually not a lot, they just had a handful of standards. So if a package matches Pangeo standards and they meet our standards as well, they can go through review, and then everything else is the same. They become supported by our community. They get the visibility across domains that we offer. They can take advantage of our partnership with JOS and get the JOS publication if they'd like that as well. But they're also a PyOpenSci package that has that Pangeo affiliation. So this is something we've been developing that I just wanted to highlight here as well. And you can check out our peer review guide if you're interested in more about that. So with these partnerships, PyOpenSci provides the structure and process for peer review, this cross-ecosystem enforcement of standards. We'd love to see some standardization of what packages look like, just the infrastructure, so that it's easier for people to contribute. If everyone's using similar types of infrastructure, it's easier for new contributors to become involved. We provide visibility of packages, and then we also start to think about, are there the same types of tools being developed across domains? And if that happens, maybe in the future, someone does need to step down from being a maintainer, and we can connect people and get people working together in those instances where there's some overlap of functionality. And then on the domain community side, we ask that we have some editors from the community that get involved that can help make sure that our checks that are domain specific are going well and are in line with the goals of the community. We try to get reviewers, obviously, from those domains. So we have that level of technical expertise related to the domain in the review. And then again, just having that communication between us and the community is really, really important. If anyone wants to check out the AstroPy discussion just to kind of see what's going on, I'm happy to, I know it's hard to like, there's a long link, it's cut off, but I'd be happy to just share that so you could kind of check it out. And I want to just wrap up, and we have a lot of really great partners already, and we're starting to build more partnerships. Scientific Python, of course, is one of our core partners, but Pangeo and rOpenSci, Journal of Open Source Software, and Open Science Labs. And then to wrap up, we are funded by the Sloan Foundation right now, so really thankful for that. This is a like bunch of ways that you can get involved with us, and here's my email if anyone has questions or wants to follow up. And we are on social media if you want to check us out and just kind of like keep in touch that way. So thank you, everyone. Just so psyched to be able to talk to you all today.
Julie, what vision do you have for PyHC collaborating with us?
Good point. I think it would be amazing if we could get all our packages PyOpenSide, if you will, get really involved with this community.
So do you see PyHC becoming one of these domain-specific partnerships?
I think that would be good.
I'd be happy to talk to y'all more just
Yeah.
to see like what you would need and stuff. But
Guess what
I
we're
would
doing
love
over
that.
lunch?
So what about the astronomy community? They have a very strong Python presence as well, and we rely on some of their stuff like AstroPy. Are they going to get, are you approaching them too for the same question?
Yeah, well, I guess I have a question for you. So know that, so Pangeo is familiar to me. I don't know all of the various subdomains.
Sure, sure.
We're definitely talking with AstroPy. Is there a different community outside of AstroPy that?
That's mostly my angle into the astronomy community is through AstroPy, just
Okay.
because it's become so foundational to a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So
Yes. So we are talking to AstroPy. I see Nick has a comment, but we are having that conversation with them right now.
Yeah, there's also Open Astronomy,
Oh.
which is kind of like an umbrella organization, and AstroPy, I think, plays a big role in that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Yeah. This is just, I'm still getting to know all the different communities. So thank you for that.
I have maybe a strange, maybe a general question, but do you have any vision to build a relationship with NASA directly? Because the PyHC and I guess AstroPy, they all come from NASA essentially. And do you have any endorsement from NASA? Because that will be very helpful.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've definitely Shell is familiar, Shell from TOPS is definitely familiar with our work, but right now we don't have a formal relationship with them. Essentially, when all of the TOPS and open source calls came out, I switched jobs. I switched jobs from CU to do this, and it took a good 6 or 8 months, and that's when all the big NASA stuff came out. So I need to circle back with them. I have a question for you, if you don't mind. What would be, is the value just because there's a lot of funding in this community from NASA, or what would that look like in your minds?
So the way I see it, it's a great resource just to start building a good quality software, good quality open source software. And for example, right now there is a NASA call that's endorsing PyHC and encourage using PyHC standards that was developed within this community. And that could be it's not on my level, so I don't know how it works on the 2 levels above me, but people who actually decide how to build a good software, they need to know this kind of initiative, because they also, my understanding, NASA is very interested in having what you're proposing essentially for the community. That's my take here.
Thank you. I will follow up on that for sure.
The code review process can range between soul crushing and really positive. So how do you go about making sure that the code reviews are constructive and supportive?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Nick. So the question was, yeah, peer reviews can be soul crushing. We do not want that. Like, that's the last thing we want. So one, I just want to say this again, that like, and I'm coming from academia, and our model is not the traditional academic model of peer review. And that's really important to us in the sense that we want the conversations to be constructive. We want them to be helpful for the maintainer. And we do want them to be a conversation, not like a, you have to do this. Like, there are some things that we suggest as standards, but if people really don't have the bandwidth to do it, like, that is okay. What's really important is that tools are usable, that things are maintained. You know, the Pi project TOML is pretty important. It's not a big, like, we would help with that change if someone needed help making that switch for some of the infrastructure pieces. But in terms of how we ensure that, we watch our reviews. Like, I'm watching issues coming in my email and GitHub, and I see the language that's being used. We encourage our reviewers we have a template, and we tell them, like, this is a constructive process. Like, if we haven't had to do this yet, but if someone started to get nasty or negative, like, our code of conduct, like, would be enforced. And so that's really, really important. The other thing that's interesting with an open review, and if you look at the AstroPi issue right now, this is something we're talking with them about. When a review is private, it's easier to kind of say what you want and not think as much about how someone might feel. But when it's public, it kind of creates some level of boundary where people are more likely to be constructive and less likely to be negative, simply because of the openness of it. So far we've had no issues, but if we did have an issue, like, I would go in and moderate. One last thing, in our packaging guide, we had some issues with people getting negative and combative about packaging best practices. Like, it turns out it's pretty, like, can get very heated. And I just stepped in and moderated. And in fact, I had to suggest that someone back down, and I will do that. So that's right now, like, heavy moderation, keeping things open, telling people that if they have issues in the conversation, the review, they can come to me, they can send an anonymous, like, message. We have a form. Like, that's very important and a really, really good question.
Do you think you could ever come on one of our future telecons and talk, like, peer review process, like, best practices, that kind of thing?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, cool. I'd love to have you
I'd
on.
be happy to, yeah.
I have a comment and then two simple questions.
Okay.
So about the agency association. So it's more than NASA pushing for open source software and open science. So watch your politics.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. So I say that because I'm on the open science team at Goddard at NASA.
Oh, okay.
So obviously coming from NASA perspective, but we want cross agency projects, and that's difficult because of so much red tape. But this obviously fits in with defining what an open source software package should be, and not just in heliophysics, as I'm sure you well know that.
Yeah.
But anyway, two simple questions would be, does the package get a badge to put on their GitHub page?
Yes.
Perfect. And part of our deliberation this afternoon and yesterday is about packaging, how to package something when it depends on other languages, specifically Fortran. I'm pointing at my colleagues.
Under a desk.
Does your review process help with that? And would you still push for a TOML file?
That's a good question. Yeah. So, okay. Loaded question. We definitely have badges. That's an easy one. We have a PyOpenSci approved badge that would go into your README. So that is a simple one. The packages in other languages, this has been something that we're actually working some with Scientific Python on, and they are advocating right now for Meson Python. You can still use the Pi project TOML for metadata. Like, you can still use it for certain parts of metadata, but when you have more complex builds, things get more complex. And a lot of people right now are moving to Meson Python. Like, that's what all the core projects are slowly moving there. I can't answer your question of, like, we don't have the best practices for doing that yet. I know that the community wants and could use that. And so all I can say right now is it's on my radar. Our packaging guide started with pure Python packages because we just wanted to get some early wins. We knew that that's a simpler thing to figure out than wrapping other languages, starting to get into extensions. Right now, if you're using a front end, what we're suggesting is a tool like PDM because it supports Meson Python, and that's really the direction that people are going. In my dream world, in a few years, I would love to have us have some examples for non-pure Python, what that should look like. Okay. And if anyone here is expert in that space, like we could use help because you're not the only person that has asked that. And we're kind of trying to figure that out. So I'd love to chat more. I saw the hands kind of going in these directions. Like, let's talk more because I know we need that, but we don't have an answer for you right now yet.
Are you in our
so-
Slack by chance?
What's that?
Have you joined the PyHC Slack by chance?
I am not on the PyHC Slack, but I'm,
Okay, I think it would be nice to have you there, just
Yeah,
to chat with
invite
us
me.
occasionally.
yeah,
So-
invite me, please. Yeah.
So just going backwards, the Pi project TOML plus setup to Pi still works too. The metadata goes in either way, and there's reasons why we're using setup.py. I'm not going to go into that holy war. But in the question of having you come in and talk about peer review with us, that would be great. Not just in terms of like the whole package peer review, but in terms of approaching PR review and how we encourage contributions that way. And I think, Nick, that was one of the topics you were bringing up yesterday. And also not necessarily your project review, but we have these standards and we've been self-reviewing. We haven't figured out a really good way to have collaborative assessments of that in a way that's productive. So just talking about that topic broadly would be great.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy to jump in on a telecon whenever it would make sense. So let's keep in touch about that. Yeah.
I have a question. If we want to submit our package to be reviewed by PyOpenSci, what about dependencies of that package? Do they also need to get reviewed or?
No, we do not. That is a good question though. And I know that that's a whole other kind of can of worms in terms of dependencies having challenges. We just focus on the package that's being submitted. So we do not review dependencies, but we do make sure that things install. So that's as far as we go in the dependency space. That's a good question.
One question from the chat.
Okay.
Justin asks, can you describe review mentorship? What does that look like?
Oh, great question. So we've done this a couple of times now. And so essentially what we do is you would sign up to be a reviewer, or we get you on board to review a package. And then we have a small team of people that will help you through that process that you can ask questions with or of. And normally that happens in our Slack channel. So we just will set up a small like DM group where someone can come and just ask questions. And we will support as much support as you need in that process. Like we will provide that if that's helpful. And I'm happy to answer other questions if there's others related to it.
We're actually 5 minutes over, so we need to move on to Sean's thing, but Leah's here. Please feel free to continue asking questions, and I'm going to send you the invite link for Slack. So we can also have her there, chat in general. Okay, Sean, you're up.
All right, I'm up. Let's do that.
Thanks again, Leah.
There. All right, got my lapel mic on. Is that coming through okay? I'm going to assume yes. All right, so I tested this once. Let's see if it still works. I can go here. I can go to Here, one second.
Okay, it looks good. It's not displaying on your screens over there though.
Yep. All right. Maximize that. We should be seeing my slides on Zoom. And
Yes, we do.
we should be good to go. All right, awesome. Well, I'm going to be up here for the next maybe hour and a half or so. So you're stuck with me for a little bit. I've got a little talk here. I'm going to be talking about generative AI tools for PyHC. And then afterwards, I have an unrelated discussion, totally unrelated, about a solar eclipse test event. And maybe I'll give a quick blurb about the test event discussion so people know to hang around for after this AI talk in case it's not super engaging for you. After this talk here, we're going to totally switch gears into the 2024 solar eclipse. I'm assuming everyone in this room knows about it at least and would like to go see it. Well, Tess is going to be in Texas that year, and we've been in like partnerships with them. And I submitted a little proposal to do like a real-time data display of some data streams that would be affected by the solar eclipse. Sort of the idea being like the whole group can like go outside, watch the eclipse. It'll be amazing. And then you go back in and there'll be this awesome, like huge display of like data streams running in real time from PyHC packages that show things like dips in the ambient temperature and the solar radiation on the ground level. And maybe I have an idea of like 11 different data streams that could be used, but I'll want input from people in here. I've messaged this out in like our email group before, and some packages already like raised their hands and said, yes, we think we can be a part of this, but we will need PyHC packages to add real-time display capabilities to make that whole thing possible. The good news is you could get to go, that'd be a work reason to go see the eclipse, which is always nice. But anyway, I will get to that after I talk about generative AI tools. So please stick around for that discussion after this. And let's see. So we'll be talking about like Chat GPT and stuff here for about the next hour, which I know this room has thoughts on because that's what we ended up talking about all lunch yesterday. And I've got some thoughts here about how we could be using it to enhance PyHC. And I have this a vision really of where I think we could go with this in the very near future. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of like creating custom chat bots and apps that use LLMs as functions to really see where this technology can be used. And I actually kind of think my job as the PyHC tech lead could be more or less automated away. And I think we'd all be better off for it, which is a funny thing to say, but I'll be justifying this in the next few slides here. So about half the talk, I'll say, will kind of just be on like the current state of AI. And then the second half will be applying that to PyHC. I kind of feel like I'm making large claims on the PyHC side of this, so I need to back that up with some evidence in the first half of this talk. So I'll give you the background info here. I'll talk about what I do in PyHC as the tech lead, and then talk about a little prototype I built that I'm calling PyHC chat at the moment. Maybe because I'm not creative, maybe because I haven't asked ChatGPT to give me a better name for it. But we can talk about how PyHC chat can tackle some of my roles as the PyHC tech lead. I'll talk about the limitations of my prototype, where it could go in the near future, and where this could go for science as a whole, which is the part that gets me real excited. But yeah, anyway. So we've all seen ChatGPT, or I mean, maybe I shouldn't assume that we all have. How about show of hands, who's at least heard of ChatGPT? 100%. Keep it up if you've used it at least once. Again, 100%. And maybe keep it up one more time if you feel like it's changed the way you do your work.
No, it hasn't.
About half, and no, it hasn't. Nice. Well, I'm going to be mostly talking about OpenAI's models in this talk because I'm looking at the state of the art and they are the state of the art at the moment. Although I will take various moments to interject that Google is starting to catch up, and there are other open source large language models that in the same vein are also catching up, and in a couple ways have actually surpassed OpenAI's models. So this whole space is moving very quickly, and it's an exciting time to be alive. We know that this stuff is flawed, but it really already kind of has changed the world, right? I mean, seemingly overnight and kind of out of nowhere, at least it caught me by surprise, we now have like these oracles capable of discussing like the sum total of human knowledge from the internet, which is pretty crazy. You know, they're prone to problems like hallucinations. They're all out of date. They have like these knowledge cutoffs. There are few publicly available tools. The cool bits like their multimodal inputs have been unreleased yet. But still, it feels like we're witnessing the birth of a technology that's as important as the advent of like the internet or electricity, you know? So it feels like as PyHC, we should be hopping aboard this train to leverage it in any way that we can. So in just a few short bullet points, before I get into like some background info here, my vision of PyHC chat is sort of like having a one-stop shop on our website to learn anything about PyHC. You know, if you can just very quickly imagine a chatbot that knew everything about all of our packages, you wouldn't have to worry so much about looking through package documentation or finding examples in the gallery if you could just have a conversation with a thing that would tell you exactly what you need to know, right? I've got a bullet point here that it really potentially could do your research, write your code, and then write your paper too. So this could be a huge workflow enabler. I think PyHC has some large overarching goals that I could accomplish with blazing fast speed if I had these tools at my fingertips. And potentially even I could see a little developer bot floating around GitHub and doing things like writing comments on GitHub issues or suggesting fixes to things, or maybe even going so far as opening PRs once the technology gets sufficiently advanced. But before we get there, I feel like we kind of have to talk about what we are at today to stay grounded a little bit. So I want to give an update on the GPT-4 API from OpenAI. I'm going to be talking about this concept of large language model agents, which are not just chatbots, but things that actually use tools and interact with the world and do stuff for us. And then how to chat with like your own personal data, because oftentimes these models don't know things about the stuff that you want them to know about. And there's ways to accomplish this. And I had to leverage them to make my prototype. So just in case anybody isn't aware of the distinction between ChatGPT on the website and the APIs, you get a lot more knobs to twiddle when you have the API. You know, the ChatGPT online is like one implementation with like some set parameters of like how creative is it going to be and what's its system prompt for how it's supposed to act and everything. This is a little screenshot of a website you get when you have access to the GPT-4 API, which is something I had to both pay for and sign up for a very long wait list to get access to. So I was lucky at all to even get this before this talk came out. But you can kind of see over here on the left, there's like this system prompt where you get to tell the bot what it is. The default is like, you're a helpful assistant, but it could be anything like you are Steve Jobs, but French, or you are a master PyHC member, you know, something like that. And you have little knobs like temperature is how creative and random its outputs are going to be, length of the responses and things like that, which is pretty cool. And it's really important to narrow in on GPT-4 here, because the free version of these models, GPT 3.5 Turbo and things like this, really aren't up to the task of doing what I envisioned them doing. But GPT-4 is a whole different ball game. And if you haven't really seen what the difference is between them, I've got a few fun slides coming up after this, but this is just sort of a visual representation of the improvements, where the green bars are GPT-4, the blue are the earlier models, and these are various benchmarks, like in its ability to learn about technology, take history tests, math tests, science, coding, things like that. Obviously, the green bar is bigger. on all of them, which generally means it's more capable in every way. But it's also interesting to note that this is actually already an outdated graph because it's not taking into account recent developments in prompt engineering, like chain of thought reasoning and reflection, which very quickly are things like, if you ask a model in its prompt to think through its reasoning step by step, the simple act of doing that activates this chain of thought reasoning that actually gets you better results out of the model than if you don't do that. And these models have the ability to reflect on the answers they give out and find find issues in their answers and correct them. So there's actually already been another paper that I couldn't get a nice graph out of, where someone just implemented a little recursive thing where every time you ask a prompt, it will use chain of thought reasoning and reflect on its answer to potentially fix any problems. And some of these benchmarks shoot up to like 95%, where like 80% is about the best you're getting over here on this graph. So prompt engineering and things like this can already improve the performance more than even OpenAPI thought possible when they first started talking about this in the public sphere. And now this is sort of the fun part of the talk here, where I show a few impressive examples of what the thing can do. And then I sort of take this back down to earth. So this is just a fun little picture to visualize some of the progressions in these AI models, where this is a researcher who had access to GPT-4 as it was being trained. And we're seeing iterations of the person asking it to draw a unicorn in the like text shape forming language TIC-Z, where on the left here is the first time they asked to draw a unicorn. They did more testing and it got to that, more testing and it got to that. And you're generally just seeing the improvements in quality. And this is interesting for a couple different reasons, most of which is this model wasn't made to draw anything at all. So the fact that it can do it at all is pretty surprising. But also it's one of those things that demonstrates that it has some representation of reality inside the weights somewhere, because it has to have a conception of what a unicorn looks like to be able to do something like this. And that's not a part of its training set. It's just reasoned through and conceptualized these things. The point being, we're well past the abilities in GPT-4 of just predicting the next word. And these things are starting to show more signs of general intelligence, although AGI is still off. This is what GPT 3.5 spits out when you ask it to draw a unicorn, just to give you the comparison between the two. It's pretty stark. Here's an example of GPT-4 is a multimodal model, if you didn't know that. So it works with different inputs, not just text, although that's not been released to the public. So really no one has the ability to feed it images and do things like this yet. OpenAI views that as a safety thing, which like fair. But in this picture, they're showing it this little picture here and asking it, what happens when the glove drops? And we're seeing the model can reason out that it will hit the wood block, it will hit the wood plank and the ball will fly up, which, yeah, that's already impressive. But I will point out that actually a lot of these tests that it was taking here, it took the test by looking at like pictures of paper when it was doing the things, because not all tests can be just put into a text. Like a math test might have a graph, or a medical test might have like CT scans or things like that. And so, you know, it has the ability to do that. Just one more example of that is this picture of a bunch of balloons tied to an anvil. And you ask what would happen if the strings were cut, and it knows the balloons would fly away. And I want to note that this is actually already better image processing than what any company has been able to produce before, including Microsoft, which is, you know, kind of their biggest partner at the moment. Microsoft has had this Seeing AI tool for blind people for about a decade now. They demoed it to me when I went to Microsoft in 2018, and it can do some stuff like, you know, you blindly point your, I mean, imagine you're a blind person, you're like pointing your camera around and trusting an AI to like, you know, tell you what it's seeing in front of you. It performs like crap compared to just this large language model that happens to have acquired image capabilities. And the short of why is because it really seems to be understanding the world in a much deeper level than what, you know, previous AI vision tools were doing. And this last little example of the capabilities of GPT-4 is this now famous example of the president of OpenAI when they were announcing GPT-4 doodled an idea for a website on a napkin over here. This is his joke website where it's supposed to have 2 different jokes where the punchlines are hidden, but you push the button to reveal them. Very bad handwriting, very poorly layout, very poorly described, but he took a picture of it and said, make this website. And in an instant, it used the code plugin that it had access to at the time to generate a website that was exactly that. So these things can do pretty cool things already. And this stuff is already a few months outdated, which at the speed that this is going is kind of a lot. I see a raised hand. I'm going to encourage, give Rebecca a microphone because I want people to interrupt my talk at the right times to talk about this, so I'm not blowing past stuff.
Is this specific part public?
This specific part, no, because this relies on both its image input capabilities and a code interpreter plugin that have been released to very few people outside of OpenAI.
Negotiate for this to be released to, say, organizations for website redos?
That becomes more of a legal thing. I mean, OpenAI has actually been talking to Congress a lot lately about like regulations and what the pace of AI rollouts should be, especially as the arms race with like Google is getting faster and potentially more dangerous for the public because of it. So it's kind of a hard sell right now to get OpenAI to like give us more things. One second. So that's about all I had to say about the differences in the most up-to-date version of GPT-4. I want to talk a little bit about LLM agents, which are the things that can actually use tools and do stuff for us. And by show of hands here in the room, who's heard of AutoGPT? Is this new for anybody? I've got some hands, but mostly not. I'm glad about that, actually. Yeah. Has anybody heard of AutoGPT? Show of hands. And we got like 2 people in the room. Well, buckle up. This is AutoGPT is, I think, actually still the most popular open source GitHub project right now. They were trending at #1 for like more than a month. I haven't checked it recently, but they haven't left the top 5 for a long time. And it's basically like a bunch of different AIs that interlink together in a way that allows it to do things autonomously. The basic idea is that you give it a broad goal, like make me money, and then it figures out how to do that and goes off and does it. It carries out, I'll just read what I have here on this slide. It carries out complex multi-step tasks by creating its own prompts and feeding them back to itself, creating a loop. It'll break down large tasks into subtasks and spawn helper bots to complete them and check its work. So you can imagine if you just ask it, make me money, it'll generate a list of some sub goals that it thinks could maybe make you money. And it'll make a bunch of little helper bots that'll go one by one. Your job is to think about this bullet point. Your job is to think about this one. And then they go off, they go on the internet, do things. They have a bot that's like checking its work, making sure it's staying on task and that the little agent bots are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And this is a huge step towards just artificial general intelligence. And OpenAI's engineers have admitted that they felt like they should have thought of this first before open source communities just went and did it, but open source beat them to it. And this is generally thinking that chaining together different bots and giving it internal reasoning structures is going to be the next big step towards achieving artificial general intelligence. And I've got, I have 4 bullet points on here. I have 3 examples. I removed one of them of things you can do with AutoGPT. And then I'll stop talking about that. I just wanted to make sure people are aware of this because part of my prototype rests on this ability. So just one example of what you can do with AutoGPT is improve AutoGPT with itself. This is a Twitter post from the creator of the GitHub repo. And he's showing how AutoGPT is able to write its own code and execute Python scripts. They actually gave it its own Python interpreter and things like this. So even though OpenAI has not released plugins to the public, tools like this, just people hacked it together. So now this thing can access a web browser. It can write code and execute it. It can download things onto your computer if you give it like permissions to do that kind of stuff. So actually a lot of the code behind AutoGPT in the GitHub repo right now was written by AutoGPT, which is cool to think about. We're already on the part of the curve where AI is improving itself. Another example is people are using this to increase their own personal wealth. This is just some dude on Twitter who decided to outsource his entire personal financial life to GPT-4. He said he gave AutoGPT access to his bank, financial statements, credit report, and email, and he talks about how it's going. And I've written in my speaker's notes here just some things he said in his Twitter thread. I'm just going to read them off for a second. The AI went and scanned his bank account first and found cancelable subscriptions. And then it got to work canceling them, which required interacting with the world, doing things like the bots had to write physical letters and mail them out through the UPS. There's an API called USPS Lob that lets you do that. So the AI could actually write handwritten letters and mail them to people. It was chatting autonomously with agents in like little live chats on their websites to get things canceled, or it was even going to like websites and clicking buttons to unsubscribe from things. Then next, he asked it to scan the same transactions in his bank account and find examples where it could easily get a refund. And AutoGPT found a United Airlines in-flight Wi-Fi receipt for about $37. And it asked him, did your Wi-Fi work properly? And when he said no, it immediately got to work drafting a persuasive and firm legal letter to United requesting a refund. The letter was both legalistic, citing FTC statutes, and convincing. The bot sent it to them via their website, and within 48 hours, he got the $37 refund. And then the last thing he said, now it was time to unleash GPT-4 on my bills. So he's a customer of Comcast, and he asked it to negotiate his bill. So it started a chat with a Comcast representative who eventually offered a $50 discount. And the bot pushed back and said, no, in all capitals, I want more. And it got more. He got $100+ off of his Comcast bill. And then the last thing he notes is that GPT 3.5 never pushed back for what it's worth. But GPT-4 was like, no, my job's to get this guy money, so I'm going to get him more money. Say it again. This was just what I read from his Twitter thread. So, and this was also from like April 29th. So for all I know, he's done a lot more than this by now. And then the last, which is my favorite example that I've seen so far of people using this, and the thing that I think more directly ties back into PyHC, is this ability to create apps completely from scratch. Because this thing can not only write its own code, but it can debug the code, it can deploy it, it can, iterate on it. So by giving it vague instructions to like create an app or something, it can actually do it. And I have a video, it's a short one, only 3 minutes long. But what I'm gonna have to do for the people who are remote is I just pasted a Google Drive link into the Zoom chat. And what I'm going to ask you to do is pull up that link, and I'll give everybody who's remote like 20 seconds to do that and get the video to load. And I'll do a little countdown, like a 3, 2, 1, and then I'll press play in the room. And if you want to follow along at home, watch the video in the link that I just sent. And I'll quickly monitor the chat to make sure no one has any issues with that. Yeah, and I'm doing that because I can't figure out how to route the audio of the video into the Zoom. We were playing with that for like 15 minutes this morning. I just couldn't get that. So sorry. I got an okay. I got 5 seconds left on my, what I said, 20 seconds. Cool. All right, so if you want to watch the little 3-minute video at home, hopefully you have it queued up. Now I'm going to do 3, 2, 1, play. Boom. There it is. So a couple thoughts on that is that was originally a 5-minute YouTube video that I cut up for time for this talk. There was no cheating in that video. The skips were my own edits. In the actual thing, it was just the guy holding his phone against the laptop for 5 minutes. But yeah, there's 5 minutes in a few English sentences from no app existing to it created the app and deployed it, and it exists on the internet and just works. That is public, actually. That is something you could go do today if you wanted to. I can pull up a link to the AutoGPT Git repo and I can paste it in there later. I will do that. But yes, AutoGPT, if you want to look into that kind of stuff. We've got a microphone being passed.
So he called it Code Jarvis or something.
Yeah.
Did he build that on top of AutoGPT or that?
He did build that on top of.
Yeah. So that, because he was talking and there was a speech to text thing.
Yep.
So he added a bunch of stuff on top of that, I guess.
Not
right?
as much as you would think, actually.
Okay.
It comes out of the box with speech abilities using a thing called 11 Labs, but you have to have like an API key and an account to use that. But all he did was just activate the 11 Labs voice plugin to get the integrations. But the Jarvis thing, I don't remember exactly how he did that, but I think most of what he did there was just link it to Siri. So that's why he was interacting with it through Siri on his Mac instead of having to like use a command line terminal.
Right, right.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, just let that sink in for a second. You know, that was iteration, debugging, creatively interpreting, like what should this look like, and then doing it all in a matter of 5 minutes. And that's just a step one. You know, he could go on from there and say, all right, now improve this, add images, add conversations, you know, and this becomes this whole paradigm of just speaking to computers and having them do things for you. So there's kind of the end of the fun part of the talk, or maybe hopefully what I'm going to say next is still fun, but that's the fun part for me. I like watching all that crap. And you know, this just is going by so quickly that week by week, it's all I can do just to keep up with the advancements in the field. But I'm going to quickly talk about this concept of how to chat with personal data that wasn't a part of the model before I show you my prototype that does just that for PyHC. And it's important to know that GPT can learn knowledge in 2 different ways. Like one's via its model weights, which is like what it was tuned on in the training set. And one's via model inputs. So what you say in your prompts to it, it will remember for the duration of the conversation. And we have to worry about this a little bit because ChatGPT knows about us, but only kind of. The text is probably small, so I won't read the whole thing, but if you can read it, that's cool. I'll let you know that this is me asking just plain old ChatGPT on the OpenAI website to tell me everything you know about the Python and heliophysics community PyHC. And right off the bat, it says it has a knowledge cutoff date of September 2021. But as of that date, it says some key aspects of us are community building, open source software, interoperability, education and trading, and code standards and best practices. Pretty much nails it, actually. And then it gave a few examples of some widely used PyHC packages like SunPy, HelioPy, PlasmaPy, and SpacePy. Note, HelioPy, though, was deprecated in 2022. And it wouldn't have any way of knowing that because its cutoff date was 2021. So it knows about us, but as we were 2 years ago, which is actually not super helpful because a lot changes in 2 years, especially with software development. So if we want to have conversations about us as we are today, we have to tell GPT what's new. And you do that by supplying relevant context in the conversations, which is actually a pretty straightforward process. This is like copying and pasting code snippets into your prompt before you ask questions about it and things like that. But you run into this bottleneck of all of these models have max token limits. So you can't just paste an entire encyclopedia into your prompt and ask a question about it. It's going to say, well, buddy, that was way too much, like shorten that. So you kind of have to work around that. And, you know, copying and pasting is just tedious. It sort of ruins the experience of interacting with something that's supposed to be intelligent. And you have to make sure not to include too much. So we'd really like for there to be a better way. And luckily there is. There are tools that exist that support knowledge search and retrieval, which is more or less the idea of giving the model access to like a database of information. And as you're asking questions about it, it will intelligently pull the info it needs to know out of the database and use it as part of its answers. The main tool for doing this right now is LangChain. It's another open source project on GitHub. Again, insanely popular. All of these open source things using AI are trending in like the top 10 of all GitHub repos right now. So this is a real hot topic to be involved in. I used LangChain to build my prototype. It's basically just a way to include large language models as functions in your code so that you can actually, you know, incorporate them into a Python script or a larger workflow. It says right here in its README that it does things like question answering over documents, building custom chatbots, and building agents. I will note that AutoGPT was built on top of LangChain. So LangChain's kind of like the base layer for building apps with this stuff. And AutoGPT just happens to be like one of the most impressive things people have built with it. But you have to jump through a lot of hoops actually to get this to work right now, it turns out. Because we're working with neural networks here, which, you know, at heart are just a bunch of numbers and weights stored in a graph of nodes. So what you do actually, this is a very rough explanation of how you take text from something that it needs to know about. You create what you call an embedding of it, which is sort of just like a numeric representation of the information in the text. And you store that in what you call a vector store. You know, it's an array of numbers, it's like a vector. And that kind of becomes its memory. And then the idea is it can retrieve stuff from its memory and then have intelligent conversations with things that it wasn't trained to have intelligent conversations about. But there are issues with scale. There actually is a search aspect of this. So there's actually a lot of fine tuning, and there's like a whole science of like, how do you automate the process of finding the right bits of information based on the prompt to shove into the prompt so that the thing knows what it wants. And that's actually where I got kind of stuck building my prototype. I didn't have enough time to really nail that part of it, but it was an important part, and it's what we have to use at the moment if we want to be doing this kind of stuff. I have a light at the end of the tunnel after I talk about my prototype, where this whole paradigm might soon become completely obsolete and it won't be so hard, but that's what we're working with. And like I said, I'm about 35 minutes into the talk, which was like 5 minutes longer than I meant to go, but there's half of it on the background info you need to know. And now I can talk about PyHC chat, my little prototype that I put together to have a PyHC chatbot. And I want to talk about it because I have this assertion that soon AI will be able to do my job better than I can do my job. And I think we'll all benefit from it. I kind of have to talk about what I do in PyHC before I can explain more about that. So I've got just 2 quick slides on that. At a high level, the main things I do in PyHC, or what I'm supposed to be doing at least, is first and foremost, understanding all of our PyHC projects, ideally all the code and documentation in there, which I'll just plainly admit, I haven't done that. I mean, I have not taken the time to read through all of the 60-ish repos we have and their documentations. Even if I did, I don't know if I could keep that all straight in my head. That feels like a lot. So right off the bat, the first part of my job description feels better suited for an AI to be doing. I'm also promoting interoperability among our packages, like creating Python environments where you can import all the PyHC packages, reducing duplication and using interchangeable formats. I have this note, GPT-4 has already helped with this part because in the hackathon I'll be leading later today on building out a virtual environment that includes all the packages. I've gotten, I think, further than anyone else has in this effort. And the way I did it was using ChatGPT to write me a script that went through all the requirements and found any dependency conflicts and stuff. And I got a nice table, ended up getting a requirements.txt file. And it actually turns out there is a set of version numbers for all like 250 of the requirements for all of our packages. If you recursively list out what everything would need to have in the environment, there's a very slim area of version numbers where if you use them, there's in theory no version conflicts whatsoever, which was actually news to everyone that I told that to. It was news to me. So thanks AI for helping with that already. The other 2 main things I'm doing is enforcing development standards, like making sure things live up to PyHC standards. And in theory, when I have time, I evaluate projects, I improve their documentation and their code to help bring them up to snuff if they aren't already. And I maintain the PyHC website, which at the moment is just simple things like building web pages and blog posts and like adding to the PyHC gallery. But as I'm already sure you're thinking about, I think an AI model could pretty easily look at a code repo and say yes or no, does it meet these various standards, go through one by one. If it can create a whole app with your voice, of course, it can copy and paste like formulaic meeting web pages and do that kind of stuff for me. So anyway, I can do all this. Like, I will claim that I was still a good person to hire for this job, but it'll take me a long time. These goals become overarching goals that guide my work throughout years to come. I mean, I could probably spend all of my early career as a scientist trying to check off just that checklist of things right there. And I really think AI will soon be able to do all of it faster and better than I ever could. And it maybe even could today if it had up-to-date info on all of our packages and if we had enough time to throw the app together. So when I realized that, I did what anyone would do and I built the prototype. Right? So the basic idea is I have one main like chatbot that you're interacting with, and it's using a bunch of other little helper bots that are all experts on the individual packages. So, if we have 60-ish PyHC packages, there's like 60-ish chatbots floating around inside this program. And as you're talking to the main chatbot and asking it questions, it's realizing, hey, this is a question about Happy. Like if I'm asked, how do I download a Happy data set? It will go talk to the Happy chatbot. Be like, hey, Happy, how do I download a data set? It'll explain it to the big model, which explains it to the user. That's the main idea of how that works. And I got a diagram. It's a little messy and a little complicated, but I'll walk through it and hopefully it'll make sense. The main hoops I'm jumping through, if you'll remember, is I'm getting the chatbot to a point to where it knows up-to-date info about us as we exist today, which means supplying the relevant context inside the prompts and automating the process of pulling the info out of the GitHub repos so that it knows what it needs to know. I'll zoom in on like the top half of this diagram here first. This is the ingestion phase where we're giving it all the info from all the GitHub repos. And apologies if I use weird terminology or big words, feel free to stop me or interrupt me at any point to ask a question. But what we're doing is on the left, we're starting with all of the GitHub repos. So I've got 4 of them there, imagine a lot more than that. And we convert every repo just to text. So if there's any PDFs or if there's any like markdown that has weird stuff in it, just make it plain text. And then you can split that plain text up into chunks, you know, say like maybe 7,000 characters, and just go and chunk up the text. And that makes it, you know, bite-sized information pieces that a model can actually handle at once. You use an AI model to create the vector embeddings. So you take the text chunks and you make numeric representations of them and you store them. So now the info from the GitHub repos is stored in a medium where the AI can understand it. And I'm giving the repo LLMs, the ones that are supposed to be experts on them, the ability to query the vector store on the bits that come from their GitHub repos. And to give it a bit of help, I'm also summarizing all of the text chunks from the repos and getting like kind of a report, so to say, of everything that's in the GitHub repos. So you have like this textual summary of everything that's in there. And then you have the ability to dig even deeper by digging into the database. So that gives these little helper bots a vague understanding of everything they're supposed to know and kind of helps them know where to look. And then let's look into, once we have those things, what is the user actually interacting with, which is the bottom part of this diagram. So you've got a user prompt up top, and you'll ask it a question like, how do I download a happy data set? And the PyHC chat is actually initialized with all of the repo summaries. So it has like a first pass of, you know, everything that's in the GitHub repos to have a vague understanding of some stuff. So it's actually able to give you a response to every prompt that you ask it. But in most cases, you don't see that answer, because what I do is I immediately feed the first response. Well, here, let me back up a second. I've got 4 main little parts floating around in this using AI. I've got the main chatbot you're talking to. I had this repo selector, which its entire job is to look at a part of a conversation and spit out a Python list of what PyHC packages are relevant to the conversation. So if I'm asking a question as simple as, how do I download a happy data set? It'll spit out just a list of happy. If I'm doing things like, what are the differences between SunPy and HelioPy or whatever, you know, it would come back and say the relevant repos are SunPy and HelioPy. And actually right off the bat, that's freaking cool. Because you imagine writing that function yourself in Python and it's damn near impossible, right? But it's like almost like Mr. Meeseeks from Rick and Morty, for people who like Rick and Morty, where literally the system prompt I've given this is like, you are an AI chatbot whose sole purpose is to look at conversations and spit out repos of, you know, that are relevant to it. So I've got that guy in there, which helps us know what repos are relevant to the conversation. And I've got this little question separator that when there are more than one repos relevant, it'll kind of split apart the prompt into like multiple questions for the different repos. So if the question's like, what's the difference between HelioPy and SunPy? It might spit out questions for HelioPy like, what is everything you do? And likewise with SunPy. Hey, SunPy, what is everything you do? And things like that. And again, do it by saying your sole purpose in life is to look at questions and separate them and whatever. So now we can look through the diagram of, you ask a question, the big chatbot gives you a response, which you don't see because it's immediately fed into the repo selector. And then we look at how many PyHC repos are relevant. And actually in the simplest case, none of them will be relevant, in which case you actually just get the original answer. Like if I asked you some dumb question about unicorns, that's not PyHC related, so we don't need to do any back checking. But if only one repo is relevant, then I have this little fact check method where you give it the prompt and the initial response, and it'll say, do I think that's right? Or is there something wrong here? And if there's a fact checking that needs to be done, it will spit back its answer, and it gets fed back into the main chatbot. And I'm actually manipulating the chat history to do this. I'm showing up here in the top left a little view of the conversation from the big chatbot's viewpoint. And maybe something that's important to know is that when you are talking to a chatbot and actually having a conversation with it, it's rereading your text conversation from start to finish every single time. So as you ask more and more questions, it's starting from the top to the bottom again. That's kind of how it's maintaining its context. So in the cases where I'm fact checking a response and then feeding the fact check back in, it kind of looks like this thing up here where I've got context in brackets before the prompt. So from the main thing's perspective, when fact checks happen, it never actually remembers the fact that it gave out a bad answer. It just sees the fact check with the prompt along with it. Like, here's exactly how you download a happy data set from the happy chatbot, followed by my question, how do you download it? So it'll give you the right answer in theory. You see how that's working? Same basic thing for when there's multiple repos involved, only it just gets more complicated because you have to get fact checks for multiple different things and then feed all those answers back in. But that's basically how that works. In doing this, I have a chatbot that can interactively pull information out of GitHub repos and talk to you about them. One little example, which, wow, I apologize, that text is way too small. But I asked it once to write me a snippet of Python code that downloads a data set from Happy. And in red there is its first response that I actually just pulled out from my debugging tools. And it's close, but not right. Something I'll read off here because I'm sure you can't read it is the actual data query it thinks is data equals client.getData, giving it the data set ID parameters, start and end time. I don't know if that actually was the old Happy syntax or if it just made that up, but that's what it thought at first. But then it went through this little thing, got a fact check, and it came back, and what the actual answer ended up being was 100% correct. Sure, here's a code snippet of how to download a data set from Happy. And we're seeing now the correct data comma meta equals Happy, then give it the server URL, data parameters, start and stop time. So that's what.
Hey, Sean,
Yep.
question on that then, because yeah, I think the first one, it just said this is how an object-oriented method would do it in guest, but how did it do the fact check? Did you say wrong to it or?
Nope,
what?
that was an automated bit where the text in red was, the text in red was the initial response that got fed into here and eventually got fed down to the fact check in the Happy repo, where it saw my question, how do you do it? And it saw its response and it, Huh? The mouse doesn't show up on Zoom. It only shows up in the room. Yeah.
It does show.
It does show.
What? It wasn't doing that on my Mac. I guess that's the difference between.
We're watching now.
Cool. Well then, hey, I will stop pointing with my hands so much. But yes, the Happy repo looked at the first bad response and said, that's not quite how it's done. Actually, happy.py says it's done this way, which is why it ended up being correct. That makes sense, Sandy?
I'll think on it and eventually it will make sense. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty convoluted right now. And actually, I'm going to be talking about why that has to be and why it might not have to be very soon right now.
Does the user see both of those responses?
The way I've implemented the code is you can pass a verbose flag into it where yes, you would see both. But in the normal running of the thing, you wouldn't want to see the inner workings of all that stuff. So you would just see the good output. Yep. I really wanted to give a demo of this in action for this talk. But sadly, the prototype doesn't work good enough for me to do that. I can almost guarantee if I asked an audience question to just throw it at the thing, it wouldn't come back with a good answer. So just to avoid myself the embarrassment, I'm not demoing it live. But the main point of failure here was the retrieval method. Like I talked about, there's actually a search component here to where it has to look at the prompt and then know what information to pull out of the vector store. And just generally speaking, mine does that wrong, like a lot. Not sure exactly why, but my hypothesis is because they're using something called semantic similarity when they're doing this lookup, which is a step better than just like simple keywords. Like it's not looking at the words in your prompt and then finding similar keywords in the repo. It's trying to parse out the meaning of your prompt and then look for parts of the repo that have similar meanings. My guess is that because this semantic search was more designed for natural language and really not code at all, that's where it's falling on its face. Code is kind of a hard thing for this because it's not natural language. And I think actually what's happening, because most of the time the thing ends up pulling out the README or the change log from the GitHub repos, which is super annoying. But I think that's because that has the most English prose in the Git repo, is my guess. Like our prompts aren't talking at it in Python code, we're talking about it in English. So I think it's finding the files that have the most English words in them and saying, this is probably where I want to look. So that's why it's falling on its face. And the problem actually gets harder the larger the Git repos are. So larger packages like Komodo perform even worse in this prototype than something like Happy, which is nice and small and only has like 3 main files. But the good news is I put this together in like 2 weeks.
So Sean, sorry, just back up on that. Does that mean that, is it thinking and chunking in terms of files? Does that mean it's missing our doc strings?
It missing your doc strings? Oh, like the comments and stuff?
No, the doc strings.
Sorry. My talker brain isn't remembering what doc strings are exactly.
They're the big, they're the strings that get attached to Python objects and include the documentation for the object. They're part of the code.
The code comments, but I mean, yeah, it's in there. It's reading through that, but I don't actually have access into the inner workings of how it's doing the searching. So I'm just guessing it.
Okay.
Why this is failing. Yep. But there's a lot of improvements to explore here. Like just doing the chunk size optimizations could give you better results. Like if I made bigger chunks, you'd have statistically more you'd be statistically more likely to get the right answer in your chunk. But there's a trade-off with now you're throwing more tokens at it, which means you have less space to actually ask your question and the chat history fills up faster, blah, blah, blah. The big things I really could try is there are actually other embedding models, like something called CodeBird. If I just went outside of OpenAI's ecosystem, there are people that have made models that are specifically designed for like Python code and making embeddings out of Python code and doing things like that. So that's probably the next thing I'll try.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Please do.
So when you broke up your information, your files, and you fed it, it seems like the way this is all designed, you should just be able to point it at a web page and say, study this web page, and then I'm going to ask you questions about it.
Yep.
Because what's that? Well,
But the chunking may cut things in half that went together. Or,
It would, yep.
yeah.
Definitely happens. And actually, yeah, I implemented this without AutoGPT. I will say, I have done some tests with AutoGPT where it will go to a Git repo and like scan through the files. And, you know, if it needs to know how Komodo works, it would like start reading through Komodo's Git repo. But the problem is it fills up the chat history very quickly. And most of the time it comes back and says, I got overloaded. I couldn't read the whole thing. I broke. So, yeah.
Quick question about chunks. So do you, does it have, like every chunk has to be like a same size, or you can put variable size of chunks? Because you can easily split probably chunks by files. And like if there is a long file with a lot of functions, you can split them by the def, like
Oh yeah.
something
No,
like that.
the rabbit hole gets really deep down here. This is like a whole science that I've yet to explore. But the answer to your question is yes. And smart chat history management is actually what I was talking about there, because you can do creative things like if the chat history gets full, just give it a sliding window or something. So maybe it forgets earlier parts of the conversation, or you can like summarize early parts of the conversation so it keeps like some resemblance of like what you were talking about before, but better reasoning for the later parts of it. But it's very messy. And I want to say that I think soon this will all become a moot point, which is probably the best news because I could spend a long time just nailing this. But I think this is going to look pretty archaic and quaint pretty soon. There's a few things that might come to save us here. The first one is just huge token limits. You know, right now I'm showing you the token limits for the current models right now. The biggest model that we have access to, the big GPT-4, takes 32,000 tokens just about. And there's no one-to-one mapping, but one token is about 3/4 of a word. So you can say about 25,000 words, and that's about its token limit there. But there's a paper published actually less than a month ago called Scaling Transformer to 1 million tokens and beyond with RMT, which stands for Recurrent Memory Transformer. And in their paper, they got the token limit up to 1 million plus, actually. Almost about 2 million was the biggest they talked about in their paper, which, to give you some context there, 2 million tokens is about 1.5 million words. And there are 1.1 million words in the entire Harry Potter book series. So there's already been a paper published showing a method where you could have such a huge context window. You could paste every single word from every book in the Harry Potter series into one prompt and then have a conversation about it, and that would work. Their paper even talks about the chance of going far beyond this, maybe even potentially 1 billion tokens or even 3 to 4 billion tokens. The limiting factor becomes compute at that point. 1 billion words, 1 billion tokens would be more words than the average human speaks in their entire lifetime. So you could have a chat bot following you from your birth to death. Every single word you utter, you could throw that into one prompt with 1 billion tokens. Or there's actually pressure from the bioinformatics field to reach a milestone of 3 to 4 billion tokens, because at that point you can represent the entire human genome in one prompt. And that would just open up amazing, unimaginable floodgates for medicine research. So huge token limits are coming very soon. There are actually already, I did not include this in my slide, but there are open source models that aren't OpenAI's GPT, but just things people made on GitHub, that I think the best one you can get on GitHub right now has like 100,000 tokens, which is a far cry from 1 million, but way better than the 32,000 that's available. So this is coming down the pipeline very quickly. And that gets us to the point to where we might not have to do any of this stupid retrieval vector store stuff. We might just be able to copy and paste the entire Git repo as text into the prompt, and then it would just know everything it needs to know.
So the tokens, it's only about the prompting, right? And then it's include history. And that's basically the part of the limitation. Am I right?
It's a mixture of prompt and chat history, actually. There's a limit on how much you can input in the prompt, and you can give yourself more space in the input prompt if you tune the model to give shorter responses. So it's the prompt and the model's response that add together to become your max token limit. And also the chat history feeds into that in creative ways, depending on how much you want the model to be keeping track of the chat history. So if you really want it to perfectly remember the entire conversation, you're building up against your token limit with each new, pass of the conversation. But there's more things than just large token limits that could come to save us. Maybe Google can. Show of hands, did anybody see Google's I/O from just like last week, I think? Nope, it wasn't that cool, so you didn't need to. But it was summarized by The Verge in a 14-second clip of just the CEO saying the word AI 100 times. But they're catching up to OpenAI actually better and faster than I thought they would. Their Palm 2 model is already comparable to GPT-4 and better in some ways. Like Google took care to train it on more multilingual and mathematical data and code data. So actually their model performs a little bit better with code than even GPT-4 does at the moment. And they're coming out with this Gemini 5, which will be a competitor to the GPT. Sorry, they're coming out with Gemini, which will compete with the unreleased GPT-5. OpenAI has publicly said they feel it'd be irresponsible to release anything to the public smarter than GPT-4. So they don't plan on doing that this year or anytime soon necessarily. But Google is going all forward with it. They're saying this is a damn arms race. So we're going to release our super better model as soon as we can. So that'll be coming out soon. And they teased in their AI presentation, in their IO presentations, that Gemini will be multimodal, like it'll take images and inputs and stuff. And they're optimizing it specifically for API and tool use, things like AutoGPT, but out of the box, and memory and planning. And I'm putting those in bold and italics because they have ideas for building in this capability of just giving it files to have conversations about your private data without having to train it on it. And this Project Tailwind here is something that I'm on a wait list to try out. I haven't gotten access to the wait list yet, but they're giving you a chat bot that can chat about anything in your Google Drive. And they demoed that on stage, and it was pretty impressive, actually. You can really just put folders in your Google Drive, fill it with documents, and then have a little chat bot that you can ask questions about it. And it goes as far as to even like cite its sources. Like if it makes a claim from the document, it'll link to that document in your Google Drive. And you can imagine doing that by putting all of the PyHC repos in Google Drive, and then you have conversations about it. And it's even showing you from which file it's getting its information, so you can like fact check it yourself. Questions?
Yeah, what will be the principal difference between like the memory for the generative tool and the maximum limit of the tokens that it can accept?
That is something that Google is being intentionally vague about. Yeah, they're really focused on money and winning the arms race, so they're not showing all of their cards. They're showing things like this demo of you chatting with things in your Google Drive and claiming it will be great at remembering things and planning, but they haven't backed up any of their claims yet.
So Sean, that actually plays to two concerns, and this leads into it. One is, of course, the fact that we're at the mercy of the providers of these things. At any point, they might decide to pull the APIs or suddenly start charging for them substantially.
Yep.
And it's probably going to be expensive.
Yep.
The estimates I was seeing that, Google, again, treating this as an arms race, they think that their searches are going to start costing 10 to 20 times as much for them by moving to an AI approach instead of their existing
Because
approach.
of like lost ad revenue and stuff.
No.
Oh,
Flat out compute power.
oof.
So at a certain point, the venture capital ride is going to end. And this stuff is, of course, we're only really to a large extent seeing the outputs of the APIs, which goes into, up until this point, Google has actually been really good about publishing. And it's been really helpful to be able to understand what's going on and think about where some of these techniques might be applicable to other domains. They officially stopped publishing in February. They basically issued a gag order.
Yeah, that's ugly, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so yeah, so it's going to be interesting to figure out how to ride this wave in the context of wanting to operate on open science, wanting things to be accessible, wanting to move away from proprietary solutions.
Yep.
This is tough. We can't ignore this stuff, but it's not going to be a bed of roses.
No. I guess one thing I will say is they did talk about how their current version of their AI model, the Palm 2, they're adding it into that LangChain GitHub repo. So open source tools will start to be able to use Google models in addition to OpenAI and other open source things, which is like dipping their toe into the open science thing. But no, I don't trust Google to be completely open and transparent. And there's going to be ethical concerns and financial ties and all these things.
Don't be evil.
Say it again.
Don't be evil,
Yep.
which they ditched how long ago?
Don't you? Let's see here. I've got a handful of slides left and I'm like 6 minutes over my hour. So I'll try to go through this a little bit quickly. I'm definitely still trying to leave time for discussion after this too. So if this bleeds 20 minutes into my next thing about the test event. We've got plenty of time to keep talking about that. So I'll go quickly, but not too quickly. This is the part where I just want to spend a tiny bit of time just imagining pie in the sky. How good could this be? Yes, we got to keep in mind that there's going to be bad implementation details, like API usage might end up being expensive, or we might not want to be tied to large corporations. But forgetting all that for a second, what happens once we have an AI that has up-to-date knowledge with PyHC packages? And for lots of reasons we discussed, I think this will be soon. We're very much not the only group trying to get their own chatbot. There's huge pressures for companies to have their own chatbots to do customer service and all sorts of things. And I didn't even mention actually at any point yet Microsoft's GitHub Copilot X, which is like its own little AI pair programmer built into like VS Code and GitHub and your other things, which currently actually doesn't do anything to look at the repos you're building, but they want it to do that. So there's all sorts of reasons to think this will be coming down the pipeline soon. And if it did nothing but just understand the PyHC packages, it starts to chip away at the things that I do in my job. But once you connect that to tools like web browsers and code interpreters, think AutoGPT, well, then suddenly there's really not anything that I do in PyHC that an AI could not do. It could understand all of our code, the documentation, talk about it. It could promote interoperability by suggesting ways to reduce duplicated functionalities. It could even list what they all are, which is like something that's been on my back burner for forever, and it would take me weeks and weeks. It could do all sorts of stuff. Do we have a question in the room? No. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, once you're done talking about what all it'll do for you, I'm curious to hear about how you think it would help your job and not completely remove the necessity of you being here.
Yep. Hey, if it removes me completely, but the PyHC is better for it, I'm actually okay with that. But exactly. And for planning meetings and things like this, I mean, like a human has to be involved for a while.
The key is going to be, it could, like you said, it's out of date. And all that content that's driving it to be up to date was made by people. Right. So what feeds the models is now otherwise we're stuck. This is as far as we'll get. We'll only ever get, social media apps that it knows how to make. We'll never get the next kind of social media app because it wasn't trained on that, because it's not there, because nobody made it. So it's, same with the art stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, the future is weird.
You'll become the PyHC app trainer.
Yeah. Hey, if my job becomes to be a supervisor of a chatbot, like that might be okay.
Well, the companies, I mean, that you can take a darker view, right? They'll find cheap ways to generate that input that don't involve people that really know, right? Just
chatbots to manage the chatbots.
Yeah, or they'll farm it out to people. Look, just generate code. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's just going into this feeder system into the AI. And, so who knows where this is going? Yeah.
Yep. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, that's a really important point, because a huge amount of what we talk about in PyHC is the human angle. And that's both writing your code to be read and reused, and also the connections we make and the way we treat each other. So I think it's, in addition to the human probably being the raw material going forward, we've got to think about how do we set up an ecosystem that's using things and allowing the human side to flourish, and not just shove our code into a corner to talk to itself.
And the C in PyHC is community, right? So I don't think it's going to move your job away. I think it changes what you can do with your job with the time that you have. And I would not want an uncurated system doing what you've described, right?
Well, that's good for me to hear.
Yeah, no, I mean, even creating that system, right, is still a human thing. And so, and overseeing that, making sure it's done right, understanding how the tools can be used to make things easier for people. I mean, it was still a person talking into that video saying, I want this.
Yep.
Right? Here's my list of criteria. And so, yes, people can be made lots faster at things. So now we can start working at the next highest level. So it's not that people aren't needed anymore. It's just, this is finally another huge efficiency bump.
Huge efficiency bump. Yeah, that's
For-
kind of like how I'd like to think about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the not as dark view. The other,
Not as dark view.
there are the much darker views about AIs with agency that you tell to optimize something.
So I'm thinking we've got maybe about 15 minutes for discussions. Let me blow through to the end of these slides, and then I'll check the Zoom chat and we can discuss this a little bit more. I'm kind of going through here and just saying, like, this could be the ideal AI assistant. Once the model understands our packages, we basically just hired the most superhumanly talented intern for pennies on the dollar. And I'll note that we've discussed hiring a third human into PyHC in addition to me and Julie to like be a developer, bopping around GitHub, being closer to the code and things like that. But could be a chatbot instead. I'm kind of imagining, actually not imagining, I'm promising you today in this talk, there will soon be a chatbot feature on our website. I'm thinking within the next like year, maybe 2 years, if the technology moves slower than I think it will. But I'm imagining a nicely implemented little chatbot that you can pop up on the PyHC website to interact with this kind of stuff. And if I give it, access to a browser and a Python sandbox, potentially in a Jupyter Notebook UI, which is the best way I can think of doing this, suddenly we've got basically the best tool for performing heliophysics work, period, right there on our website.
Sean, as an intermediate step, why not the element?
Why not the element?
Or-
It could be the element too. It could be a Slack bot.
'cause-
It could be an element bot.
Because that nicely combines, again, the human and the chatbot elements so that people can do it at chatbot, ask a question, and then people can potentially refine that in the chat.
And maybe I can also point out that this is all implemented in Python, which is cool for us because yay Python, but also that's kind of easy to make plugins for those kinds of things using Python. Yeah.
I mean, I would encourage you just to put it up now. This is alpha. It's probably wrong, but it's a capability that, put these slides with it. This is what's behind it. Here's what's available now. It's 2 steps away from being crazy, scary, good. And we're working towards that, but here it is. I would just do that now. Why not? I mean, are there dangers for that?
I mean, only to my ego if it doesn't work well.
Not
Yeah.
only, I think if someone will who doesn't know what PyHC will go straight to the chat, ask the question, and will give you like bad answer or wrong answer, it can be discouraging for people to use it. So there is a danger.
Right, but is that big enough to not try something like this?
I'm wrestling with that question myself.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't really have the right answer.
I mean, you're
yet.
making it, it's kind of your call, but it's good that we're talking about it.
Yeah, that was what I hoped to accomplish by presenting this today. What's up, Darren?
Yeah, I really appreciate you being an early adopter on this and experimenting with this, but half the people in the room said ChatGPT has changed their lives, right? And to me, this is like a project that has changed your life and that it's interested you and it's been exciting, but I don't see it yet providing the results. And so what I'm curious about is are there things that, could help us improve our code or help us do things? Are there practical applications that you can prototype for us and share with the community that says, hey, here's ways of improving things, or I'm not sure what exactly the solution is, but I know you're excited about this, right? But I don't yet, and there's the potential for things being useful, but it's,
Well, the
to me,
PyHC,
maybe I'm getting too old. I'm too much of a skeptic, but to me, it's not yet. That video was cool, but he did a lot of extra stuff. You spent weeks developing these tied things together, and it's still not quite working right. To me, that's not usable for me yet, right? It's not at a place where I can use it. So it's not going to change my world.
but the pieces are there that if they improve by not factors of 100, maybe 10 or something than it would be. So it's a kind of workflow that we've never imagined before. So for us to say, oh, it's giving me the wrong answer, never mind. I think it's definitely something worth looking into. But I like Darren's suggestion of, well, what practical things could we do? Like that for the video you showed, what if that was connected to a happy? I need a happy client that can connect to either cloud resources or things at CETA
It already has good suggestions for how to do that. Yeah.
Right. So, but it makes the app for you and it says, do you already have a Helio Cloud account? No. Well, can you submit that for me? You know, that kind of stuff would be useful.
Yeah. And I will just say real quick before the next person uses the mic that my kind of intention for jumping on here was just to be an early adopter and to get somewhere to find where the limit is, so that now I can just kind of monitor the space as the field evolves. And as new technology comes out, I can incorporate it into my prototype and just kind of stay on top of it that way until the technology catches up with my ideas. That was kind of the big point. Sasha?
I have a few suggestions about the what you, John, saying. That's let's open it for everyone. I think beta test is the better way to do that. So like give access to someone who are really interested into it, because I think you're interested to see how it works, and that's a beta testing, and you can have a feedback from it instead of releasing to the public. And I see the biggest value is removing the routine. So that's or like, as you say, more adaptive or faster search through the documentation. Because if you don't know something, and it will give you, if the chat can give you the idea at least where to look, that's already a huge step forward for the solution that you're seeking. I don't think it should be built towards writing your code, but it's definitely have to help to remove the routines. Maybe writing tests.
Yeah,
it's a good example.
Yeah, writing tests and documentation, simple question answering will be like the first use cases.
Pre-reviewing, formatting, all of that.
Yeah,
we already use it one way or another. So
yep. Let's see. What else did I have to say about this in here? I've kind of said all that, so I don't need to go on that. Maybe just the one thing I will say is I do sort of see this eventually being the way that all of science moves. And I would be actually pretty happy if it did, although there's definitely ethical considerations to consider, which is my slide after this. But, just think about it for a second. Like PyHC chat could be the perfect tool for the field. And once it exists, I'm going to publish about it and go present about it at conferences and things. And then I would like to think that if we get something that's impressive enough, other fields will like to copy what we've done. So there'll be a chat bot for name your language in your field of science community, the Java in informatics community or whatever. They could all have their own chat bots, and they could use kind of what we publish about as the template for doing that. And who knows, maybe that gets us clout. Maybe we'll get credit as the first people to do this. Who knows? But I see this eventually being something that every field of science would want to have a chatbot. And I've got a bullet here that this is all fields of science being united under chatbots and open science, which is the naively optimistic way to see this going. But, eventually you could see sort of like how I have a master GPT talking to PyHC specific repo GPTs. There could be one master GPT really good at using all the GPTs from every other field of science. And how close do we get to the point of just being able to say science.solve at that point? Is this like the artificial general intelligence takeoff to where it just leaves humanity behind in the dust because it can work through all fields of science? Who knows?
Just a quick comment. I've heard from some people at NASA that there is an effort to maybe bigger than NASA to ingest all the science papers ever written into a large language model so that you can ask it questions. Yeah. Or then you feed it a new paper and say, summarize this for me.
There's already a chatbot that exists that goes through all the papers and like, wow, what is that archive? It's like X, starts with an X, huh?
It's probably just the archive.
Yeah, well, there's already one that can do that search and retrieval thing through all of the scientific papers published in there. And it's actually really good at having conversations about that stuff because paper is our natural language. So its search and retrieval works wonders there. So there already is a chatbot where you can go to have chat specifically about papers that have been published, but going one step further and baking them into the model would do good things. Anyway, what's up, John?
Yeah. To John's question, that's already happened. Amazon did it. They about a year ago. They fed, I think, just every open access paper they could get their hands on, made it publicly available. They shut it down within a week because of ethical implications. It was making it too easy to generate bullshit that sounded credible.
I can see that happening too.
Yeah, it's ChatGPT 3 also already knows a lot of science paper. And if you ask fairly basic questions about science, it actually does give you the answer. Like it gave me the fairly good answer about tell me the importance of MIC waves, and it kind of did, but in a very general format. And you can see how it's sometimes confusing terms. So if you're not a specialist, it might be a little dangerous. So I don't think it's going to happen soon. Like when the science.solve can happen on its own. Again, like it's not about creativity. It's a routine work that we can exclude. We start from assembly, then we'll move to the high language. Now it's a chat prompter, right? It's the same basic concept, but the creativity requires human, at least for now.
So I've got this last slide is the last one here before my conclusion slide. And I'll be honest, I don't have a lot to say up here about the challenges and ethical considerations, but we've been discussing this as a group for the last 10-ish minutes, which is a good thing. I'm actually glad that we kind of baked a lot of this discussion into my talk, so now we're not all trying to do it now. But something that I'll reveal my hand here in case you hadn't guessed already, that I generated pretty much all these slides using AI. And it came up with the idea of including a slide at the end about ethical considerations. And it gave me these bullet points addressing potential concerns with AI automation, balancing human input and AI assistance, and ethical considerations in research and development. Now, one good thing is that AI models, at least as they're currently trained, are constantly thinking about ethics and trying not to do scary things because that's what is being built into them. And I can also just maybe just say real quickly to make this talk, I dumped a bunch of disorganized thoughts into GPT-4 and said, make me an outline for a slide deck. It made me the outline. And then I dumped that outline into an extension in Google Slides. It's called slidesai.io. And from just the slide deck outline, it generated the slides for me. I just had to tweak them. So that's how I made this slide deck here. And it's important to think about ethical things. Thank you, AI, for reminding us at the very end.
Hey, one moment, Sean, stepping back. How much time did it take to put it into ChatGPT and then to edit the results versus making it from hand?
Yep. I had this talk 90% of the way done in 2 days. And then over the next week, I was adding different pictures to it. And I reorganized a couple slides to do the background info in a different order. But it would have taken me at least a week to put it together by myself. And I got almost all the way there in 2 days. Which, I mean, really, I got 70% of the way there in one afternoon, in a matter of 2 hours. And then it was just tweaking from there. That's really all I had. This conclusion here, I've covered the current state of generative AI tools, important background info that I felt was necessary to discuss my PyHC prototype, its limitations, where I see it going in the future, and is this the future of science? So my last slide was thank you. Now let's roast my talk. Thank you for already roasting it. And we've got about 5 minutes left for. Got about 5-ish minutes left before I should change over to talking about tests. So maybe this is where I check the chat and see if I've been missing things. Oh, not as much as I thought. I'm seeing Will asked, how is heavy reliance on a closed source uninterpretable technology different from the long-standing dependence on more traditional closed source tools, e.g. IDL and MATLAB? My answer is there's a lot of similarities there. Is this Julie, you had said something about I missed this comment when it came up. Oh, never mind. I answered it live. Okay, there you go. Well, Will, if I didn't answer something, feel free to jump in here, but apparently I might have answered you already. And there's nothing else in the chat actually, so open it up to the room or anyone online. Got any questions or comments? Maybe online because the room seems almost tapped out.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, this is Lutz.
Hi, Lutz.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear that. I would, yeah, still be cautious about the limitation of a chatbot, but it might be interesting to put an alpha version out, just for people to assist in like, how do I do this and this, and that's, we can even test it ourselves to improve our documentation or something like that, if that was something that could be
Well, there's a
iteratively done
second.
or something like that.
So I'm hearing another vote for, I should make this playable for people. I should release this in some capacity. I will look into doing that.
The idea of a beta release with people that have signed a caveats agreement or something that says, hey, this is AI, it's about, 50% right and 50% misleading, but it's a capability we're trying to grow. If you want to explore it, it's here, but please contact Sean or Julie for real details about PyHC.
And again, it's written in Python. So if anyone would help make this implementation better, I mean, you're Python developers, that'd be great. So.
Yeah, I mean, are you open sourcing it? The Python?
This is not in a repo already, but I have only used open source things so far. The only non-open source thing is you have to give it my personal OpenAI token key to actually use it, which charges my personal credit card. So there's that whole thing. But if people have signed up for the API for themselves, I can let them hook it to their credit cards instead.
But were you funded on PyHC when you wrote this?
I mean, the question was, is it funded from PyHC or could it be?
Well, as in your work that went into this.
No, I did not charge any PyHC money for this. In
Okay,
fact,
so
I'm actually short like almost $80 just for having done the testing on that prototype, just in API usage. So whoops, but hey, I got $80 to spare.
So I'm going to look at the PyHC PI and suggest potentially trying to find some budget for that then, if we think this is going to be a useful tool. And then we can't drop SPD 41A on you in terms of open sourcing it, but I think if we do start funding it, that should probably be a condition.
The good thing is, at least so far, the technology stack is open source development.
Yep.
OpenAI does not have legal things against making commercial tools using their models. So yeah, no problems there. All right, and
quick comment. So you mentioned Google, not Google, GitHub Copilot, but I think it costs money, at least right now. So probably like $20 a year per person per month. And there is an alternative from Amazon, which was released just recently. It's called Code Whisper, and so far it's free. And there is an extension for VS Code and PyCharm.
Yep.
And pretty easy to set up. Like I tried it.
I've actually used both, and Amazon's tool is less impressive than I wanted it to be, but it still works. Like if you're using GitHub Copilot, you can be like, start typing the name of a function and it'll suddenly, boom, give you like 10 lines of code implementing that function. If you hit tab, you have that function. Amazon's tool does more like maybe completing 1 line or 2 lines at a time. It's just not quite as good, but it is free, like you said. So that stuff exists. But okay, I'm at the hour-and-a-half mark here, which means I should probably switch off this subject and go into the group discussion about the solar eclipse event. But I also feel like we should all have a moment to like wash our brains of this before we completely change topics. Is this a weird spot in the schedule, Julie, to have like a break or an intermission or something?
We could have a break. Technically, this wraps up at noon, but like I'll record it so someone can see it.
True.
Let's do that.
Cool. All right. Well, then we will take a break for a little bit to wash our brains of everything I just said, and then I'll completely change topics on you.
How long a break?
5 minutes.
Yikes, okay.
Yep, whatever 5 minutes is from now, set a timer. Set a 5-minute timer. Okay, for people online, we are starting to funnel back into the room and this is about to pick back up.
Showtime.
Okay, I think we're about ready to get started again. I'm sharing a Jira ticket that I have while seeing if I can safely move this laptop a few feet away from the podium without disconnecting everything. Seems I can. That's good news. Why is that still? Oh, yes. Sorry, in the room, I still have to remove the full screen of my last talk. Minimize. And where's the Zoom meeting? Zoom meeting is over here on this desktop. Whoop. There we go. Okay. So now group discussion time. I have this little Jira ticket here. Yes, we use Jira here at Last, and I use this to organize my PyHC work. I've had a ticket for some time to corral real-time visualization PyHC packages for our planned 2024 solar eclipse event at TESS. We had some activity on this a few months ago, back shortly after the first AAS like solar eclipse task force meeting, where I sent out like a big email blast to the group pitching my idea. And I got some responses from people that I have noted here in the comments. I think first what I'll do is I'll repitch the idea of what I want to do at TESS. And then what I need from people in the room and online is basically to volunteer to do the work. but I think there's a good carrot, not just a stick for this. So I said this before my last talk, but to say it again, TESS 2024 is coming up and there's going to be a solar eclipse thing there. I have this idea for having a big data visualization of real-time data streams that would be affected by the eclipse. Things like dips in brightness, temperature, who knows, there's a whole bunch of things we could monitor. And it's kind of the TESS leadership wants to tie this into their own like solar eclipse viewing like activity. So the idea being that like Everyone goes out, watches the eclipse, comes back in and looks at the display. And we have like a PyHC developer standing by the display to not only talk about the interesting heliophysics facts of why was this data stream affected in this way when the moon was blocking the sun, but to also talk about the Python implementation of how we're doing real-time display. Because right now there's not a whole lot of real-time display capabilities in PyHC. What we kind of need is packages that can hook into data streams and, you know, feed them back out in near real time. I mean, I think something on the order of like an update every 2 to 10 minutes is like pretty much the gold standard for real-time display at this point, which would be okay. But I blasted out this idea in an email, and I'm just reading off my own comment here, and I did not prepare in advance for this discussion, so apologies in advance. But these are people who have raised their hand saying they could maybe help, and I'm not remembering exactly. So if you're a part of this list, please help me remember what the idea was. The first one was Komodo/ISWA. Huh. Zoom in. Can I do that? Yes. Yes, I can even do a little bit more. Safari doesn't like that. Okay, I get about this much. Darren or Rebecca, are any of you able to, probably Darren, speak on how any of these could be a real-time display capability?
Yeah, I mean, right now, ISWA is that for a lot of solar data. And so there's a whole ecosystem, a whole system of ISWA. It's not Python specific, but there are all kinds of bots that are always pulling in and ingesting real-time feeds of data and displaying it. I mean, most of it, again, right now is solar or space weather focused, but there could certainly be some development towards something toward that way. So that would need to be a discussion that I would have to have back at CCMC to see about pulling in specific things for the eclipse and how that works. And I would be very surprised if they weren't interested in doing that. There's certainly a lot of PR value in being involved with this.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And then the Komodo part is whether
Yes, I could. Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's.
Yes, exactly. So I think there was discussion at one time to run an ionosphere thermosphere model with the sun being blocked by the moon as an input. So if we can set that up and then even use the trajectory of the upcoming eclipse, running it through CTP or TAGCM or any model that we're supporting already, then we could set that up. So that would be very interesting to do. I think
the other tie into Komodo is then we haven't done it yet but ISWA is built on signets, little plot figures, right? And what we haven't done yet is actually have Komodo generate those behind the scenes. So Komodo can work with model outputs and generate a signet that could be displayed in ISWA. And so that's something that hasn't been done, but I think is certainly an interesting thing we could look at trying to do.
Yes, and I'll remind people that the eclipse is going to be, I should have written down the date. When is the eclipse?
April 8th?
April 8th of next year, yes. So we don't have a year, but we have almost a year to put this stuff together, which is sort of why I'm making a big stink about it now. I see 2 hands, but Rebecca's standing.
Right. So another piece that Darren mentioned to me was that there's now happy outputs in ISWA, right? And if the Komodo inputs are successful, well, if that project is funded to get Komodo outputs into happy, then those can be showed in ISWA also. So that's another cool way to do it.
Cool. John?
So just to add to the list, Steve Morley's Pi forecast tools might be a good idea to bring in, because that's about bringing the data and the model together and looking at valuation. It might be like kind of esoteric from an outreach perspective, but I think it's just, if we want to pound on as much as possible, I think that's a good idea.
What was the
LEY.
name of it?
LEY, not ELY, and it's Pi forecast tools.
Steve Morley's Pi forecast tools. Is that how you spell that?
With an E in forecast, but yeah.
Duh, 'cause that's how you spell forecast.
You get
Thank
this.
you.
So the other thing is I have no idea what the on-deployed real-time package from Chuck Smith is because Chuck has written one line of Python in his life. So how did that get on there and who put it there?
Which bullet point is that? Sorry.
On-deployed real-time graphics package from Chuck Smith. So,
Oh, you say, I'm looking for.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's Charles in the damn comment. Okay, now I see you. Undeployed. I would have to go digging back through my emails. I think I just was told at some point, because I don't know who this Charles Smith person is. Someone just in email mentioned to me at one point that they had an undeployed real-time graphics package.
So I have a guess. It might be Space Weather Underground. Because a student I just hired worked on Space Weather Underground and was doing some Python plotting stuff for those magnetometers.
Yep.
So send me what you've got if you can find that, and I'll try to make those connections.
Thank you. And it's occurring to me that I should maybe step back for a second and talk about what kinds of data streams I'm looking for. So me not being a heliophysicist and me really liking using ChatGPT, I enlisted it for some help brainstorming here. And here's a list of, 14 things that it suggested we could show data streams of. Because, the idea is just to basically have as many squiggly lines that would show dips or bumps or things that happened right when the sun gets eclipsed. And we're looking at solar radiation, ambient light intensity, temperature, atmospheric pressure, weather data in general, radio wave propagation, which is kind of out of left field, but maybe sure. Geomagnetic solar wind data can apparently be affected during some eclipses. X-ray solar data. I don't know that GPS data is really a thing that we would care to do, but apparently that gets affected. So does ozone data.
It's huge. That's enormous.
That's a what?
That's enormous. It's ionospheric effects that you measure through
Yeah.
GPS. It's very cool.
Oh, cool. And like talking about ozone data, electrical power data. This is interesting. This could include things like solar panels. If there's a data source for like how much solar energy is being collected by solar panels, we could maybe show a dip in that. Animal activity. It actually did give me a suggestion for, there's a project like Zooniverse that apparently crowdsources the analysis of wildlife observations that could maybe be utilized, but that seems far-fetched. Maybe some real-time photographs if we have a camera set up, or that doesn't really feel like one, so I will leave that. And then I actually asked it specifically that we're looking for PyHC packages to do this, so if there's any APIs to tie into, that would be great. And here's what it suggested. It said, and I'll just be reading for a quick sec. For the solar radiation and weather data, saying many meteorological agencies like NOAA provide real-time or near real-time data. For the geomagnetic solar wind data, again, we're looking at NOAA and spacecraft like Discover. For X-ray data, we've got GOES. For GPS data, it's suggesting the International GNSS service. Ozone data, it's suggesting NASA's Aura mission. Electrical power data, it says this might be trickier because it depends on the solar installation, blah, blah, blah. Animal activity, NASA and ESA's astronomical observations, blah, blah, blah. And it just says PyHC could tap into these data sources in any way. So that's the
Some of
extent.
these aren't affected at all by the eclipse, right?
Some of these
Discover is at L1. It won't know if there's an eclipse. Goes X-ray probably won't see an eclipse at all. So I don't know.
Well, there you go. And that's also why I wanted to bring this up here in this event with this group, because you all know a lot more about how this is possible than me, because I'm not a heliophysicist.
So the geomagnetic data, that's totally Space Weather Underground. That's magnetometers at high schools. It's a big outreach project. I think this is something that could cross over really well.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions. So is there a list of happy servers that provide real-time capability?
There's a list of happy servers. I don't know about the real time stuff.
Yeah, I know there is a list of happy servers, but the real time is usually
Yeah, they're
tricky.
I don't think so. The happy servers that are there are mostly for after the fact data. People have asked us, do you have a protocol that's suitable for data that's constantly streaming in real time? And you could do that by just repolling the happy server, but
Yeah.
there aren't any like that now that I know of.
So what I'm mostly curious about is, like I work with radiation belts, and we can have, and we used to have just vanilla props data as L3, and they used to be a L2 real time, and those are separate data products. And actually, they might not be comparable at the end, but knowing that exists, that you can actually get the state of the radiation belts within an hour or something, like for a particular spot, that's what is important. And I don't know if there is happy servers that actually do have near real time streaming available. And is there any way? And it would be good addition to this whole project to just have this list of near real time.
I mean, yeah, the expensive part is not the happy server, of course, but the next radiation belt mission.
Well, it's not about radiation. I just like, it's from my perspective, but it could be maybe ACE data or GOES data or NOAA data.
Right, but I'm not sure how many of those we're looking for something that's affected by the eclipse, right? So
I don't think that's. So I think Eclipse is a good umbrella, but generally, near real time is something that's everyone needs and wants, and Eclipse is a good way to show it, but not necessarily it should be affected. I think it should be a broader conversation about like what near real time capabilities Happy can have, and then application of that is what can we do like with the Eclipse. So it's like all the way around, I would say.
well, it could be if you use this for a PR exercise, right? Because the ISTP Next meeting was last week. They had a whole session on branding and how do we pitch this to the public and how do we capture the passion that we have for what we're doing. And so if you have things that are not going to be changed by the eclipse and things that are going to be changed by the eclipse, that can provide a context for discussion with somebody. I can picture a person standing. Now, these will not change because the sun is, what's happening here doesn't affect that. Here's what's happening in space. We've got things monitoring outside of all this eclipse stuff, and those are stable. A lot of things are not affected, but now here in contrast are the things that will change with the eclipse. And we can see that happening in real time. Look, the eclipse is starting. This one's dipping down, and that one, like we said, is not changing. That makes us look smarter, right? Because we knew that it wasn't going to change. But using it as just for us, it's laughable and simple, but people who've never heard of space weather, this is a chance to explain it.
But this is at the test meeting where you have experts on these things, right? I don't think this is for the general public, right? This test event.
This is true. There is an
So
audience.
you don't need to explain space weather to anyone at the test meeting.
I believe part of the test effort is that the solar eclipse activities will be public to some extent. Right?
And Happy is not really designed for that live stuff. A lot of the stuff, people that provide live streams of stuff have their own API. It's special. And that's where a lot of the back end for ICE was, ingesting this stuff live and storing it, because oftentimes the live stuff doesn't even live for more than a day, because then it gets reprocessed to level 1, level 2. And so CCMC is ingesting it and saving it because that's what drove their model. But that data is then deleted everywhere around the world after that, right? So it literally pulling in the state of the art as it goes is a custom API. And it's a matter of figuring out what sources we want to get our data from and writing our tools to be able to ingest from that API.
And I will add on top of that, that part of the motivation for doing this is specifically to get these capabilities in PyHC packages because they're not there yet. Once you build it, everyone can use it. Yeah.
Just a heads up that PySat has support for the GPS data, the GNSS network.
Sweet, thank you, Russell.
So that's from Madrigal. So I was just checking on availability. Now I know that network does have real-time data, but checking on Madrigal right now, the most recent it has is May 13th. But I'm sure there's a way to get it because it exists.
First of all, Russell, I want to brag that I recognize you just by your voice.
Oh, awesome.
But
Sorry, I
also-
forgot to say my name.
Also, I had this bullet point here. PySat was in my list, but I had said no plotting, but can get real-time data. Can I like maybe expand on that?
Sure,
How-
yeah.
How would you say this?
Well, it can get any data that we need. The no plotting comment is just that PySat itself doesn't offer plotting, but it's built on a data frame or X-ray, which itself has plotting.
Well, then,
and
yeah,
you can
that's
plot
fine.
matplotlib and all that. So, you know.
Okay, well then maybe that's a good enough bullet point then, because yeah, getting the data is the hard part. Plotting is the easy part.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
That's still a thing.
it might be too late for this, but we have almost a year. But you could maybe, if you wanted to fund something like this, this would be like a, what's it called? A TWISC proposal. It's the same one like that funded ISTP Next and would possibly fund the joint multi-institution SOC stuff. Hey, we want to stand something up. It may or may not apply though. We'd have to look carefully because there probably was an Eclipse opportunity to propose to, because Russell, didn't you look at that last time or?
Yes, and I did apply to the total eclipse for 2024.
Did
For
you
my
hear
own
back
thing.
yet?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to find motivations for people to do this, and obviously proposal money would be a good one, but as that's not my wheelhouse per se, the biggest motivations for package I can see at this point is advertising, because you'll get to stick your package in front of a bunch of emotional people who just saw a solar eclipse. You will also get, you get that exposure, you get new functionalities in your package, which is just good for everybody. And also any package who's a part of this data display should be a part of the test eclipse event, which means you get to use company dollars to fly out somewhere to get a hotel room to watch the eclipse, not have to deal with that whole hassle. So those are like my main selling points at the moment. I agree though, John, that we should look into some kind of proposal things because money is probably the best motivator. So yeah, we got that. I guess maybe I'm trying to decide how to go through next. Any more brainstorming on just how do we make the ideas come to fruition from the possible data sources I have, or going through this list of identified so far and seeing if people are on the call and if I can clean that up. Not sure which of those two paths to go down, but I had this one up in front of me, so maybe I should just go ahead and go through this real quick.
I have a
since-
comment.
Yeah, please.
So aside from the Eclipse stuff, what is the message we're going to be sending to other real-time capabilities in heliophysics by pulling this into PyHC?
What is the message we're sending?
I have concerns, maybe is a strong word, but a little hesitant about politics on this, because this is really Swipsy's playground, but then again, the world doesn't belong to Swipsy. There's a ton of this stuff built into IceWorld, but then again, that's not the only thing that can exist. But I do think there needs to be connections at minimum and maybe even collaborations between these entities so that we're not trying to jet into something that's already well populated without reaching out a hand.
Good point. And I think I do want to kind of get like maybe a little working group put together of the people who run the packages or who are thinking they would like to be involved with the event. Maybe have like a personal Slack channel or some kind of way for us to coordinate. Because yeah, it would be good, especially if functionality already exists, to not reinvent the wheel. That's actually one of the core PyHC principles. So I'm trying to avoid that. But I am also seeing just a general lack of real-time display capabilities in PyHC, but we have so many display capabilities. So I'm just kind of seeing like somewhere in there, I can imagine a place for that to fit.
Can I have a quick quick comment. There
Please,
was
Sasha.
like in the chat GPT list, there was one about the total electron content, I think, from the atmosphere. And I don't know if PyHC has any of this capability. I will just add to the ionization because that's could be an interesting point, but I just don't know, like, honestly, for the so localized event as the eclipse, how would it change ionization? Would it matter in the global electric currents at all? So,
Yeah.
but this is an interesting thought just
Yeah.
to throw on the.
Well,
on
there's
this list.
also the whole thing of not every data stream has to be affected by the eclipse. I really like that John included that because now we could also partially just show off, hey, if you didn't know you had real-time access to this, there it is, that kind of thing. Yeah. Let me see here. We got the space weather timeline viewer, which is actually not technically part of PyHC yet, but I was actually thinking about inviting them to be a part. But because they're not a part of it, I don't think anybody on this call is working with the space weather timeline viewer. Going once, going twice.
The one by Elko.
Yeah.
Well, it's built on top of Happy. So second degree, yes.
Oh, is Elko's thing built on top of Happy?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
which is why I put it in there.
Oh, neat. The space weather timeline viewer.
It's a quick plug for that. Yeah, they built a very nice visualization client. It's similar to what is here at LASP. There's a visualizer.
The space weather data portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's similar in concept to that, but he's developing it sort of open source as much as he can. And then it would be a good project, a good PyHC project to, join with him. He's got funding, but then get some NASA funding to say, hey, let's make this a fully separable thing. And because he coupled it with his server at the beginning, but now he's trying to pull it apart and make just that visualization piece its own independent project.
Oh, cool. I remember I was on like one call with him at one point when he was like collaborating with the space weather data portal, but that was like a year ago at this point. So I'm probably not up to date with what he's been doing.
Yeah, we may try to work with him for Parker Solar Probe to try and use what he's doing to make the Parker Solar Probe tools something open source that can live beyond the project.
Yep.
One other data source that you can look at is just the simple thing like a personal weather station. I mean, I just pulled up the app for my weather station in my backyard and I can like see when a cloud went over because the UVI numbers had a dip, right? And so that's a live feed on my phone of what the weather is in my backyard. And so it's an open, there should be APIs out there to download weather station data from anywhere, and you should be able to just register, what's the irradiance at that given point? Well, how bright is it?
What's the app that you use?
I'm just using an app. It's just ambient weather because I have a weather station in my backyard, so I can.
Oh, but you actually have like some special hardware.
I have hardware mounted behind my house, but if you look at the map, they're everywhere. Anyone who buys a personal weather station, you register it with something, whether weather underground or ambient weather or one of those things, and they're scattered everywhere. And so you should be able to pull data in from that. It's not our typical source of data, but it would be an interesting in an eclipse.
Yeah, that actually was one of GPT's suggestions, was finding like personal little weather things, like maybe setting up one at test. So that's an idea that we should take seriously, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost in science.
Well, I guess that's not a level of geek I've achieved yet, but getting hardware like that for myself would be pretty cool. So I'm happy to look into it.
Gerb probably knows how to do that. Julie, you know how to set up a weather station, right? Yeah. And there's also the education efforts with these small magnetometer stations, if I'm using the right words, at high schools, middle schools. Yeah. John Vandergrift saying
No, this
Magpie.
is gonna be the last thing. And
We could partner with that and see what stations they have nearby. And if they don't have one, get prepped for one.
John's parents back there, right? There you
We need a few in Austin.
Let's see. In the context of keeping this along, does anyone in the call happen to be working with either NLilViz or Geospace Lab? Do we have any of you on the call? Maybe not. It was a shot in the dark. What about PyMFR? Do we have a PyFMR representative?
I can probably make some contacts with some folks who do use NLil and are pretty heavily involved in Python development. So if you'd like that, I can reach out.
I didn't hear that up at the front for some reason. Can you say that again, but slightly louder?
Oh, this is the microphone that doesn't go to the room. I have some contacts for folks who do NLil visualizations and are heavily into Python development. So I can poke that individual and see if they'd be interested in participating.
Cool, thank you. I'm gonna add John. Is that how you spell your last name? Is it IEHOF? Yep, John Dioff can poke them. Okay, cool.
NLil is also very strongly embedded at the CCMC too, and part of the ISWA tools do display NLil simulation output. And there's a real-time run as part of that, so.
Cool. Let's see, in the interest of not letting this go on for forever, maybe I should just really quickly do like show of hands in the room. Who here wants to be involved with this little effort that I'm doing? I'm seeing Julie, Darren, Rebecca, maybe John.
Yes, yeah, I'm interested as well.
And Lutz.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Sandy. I'd like to be involved with it. I just don't know if I'll have funding to be involved with it.
I gotcha. Well, hey, even if you don't get funding, it's a reason to go watch the eclipse. Keep that in mind.
We'll sign up for the conference. That's what I try to do as well, the test conference.
And maybe just to hammer on that one more time, the last I've heard from the test organizers, the hotel they're having it at still has plenty of available hotel rooms. And they're just in the process of trying to link up the hotel website to the test website so you can actually go reserve it. But yes, at the moment, I've been told TESS is a solid way to get a good hotel room for the eclipse.
Yes, that's what.
So I've got on the call, Sandy, you mentioned you might be able to participate. That would be nice. Anybody else in the online participants list want to throw your name into the hat, and I will be corralling you all later, not today.
Russell here. Yeah, I'm interested, but I have no funding, so I could certainly participate on some calls to begin with, though.
Cool. Thank you, Russell.
The kind of John Vandegrift, are you there in earshot?
He sure is.
Okay. Is Rob's magnetometers that he's doing with, was it Supermag or Ampere?
Easy.
Easy. Yeah.
That
would have
middle
a
schools?
component?
Yeah, that possibly could, but the does the eclipse affect the geomagnetic field at your location? We can talk to Rob about that and see, because if there's that whole project is a education and outreach effort, and so even just if there is going to be a public event, having a stand there about this, hey, here's other ways the community is engaging.
Or sticking a happy server on all of them so real-time data can be served.
So that make sure I get this in a bullet point. John, could you remind me how to spell that person's name and what the name of their project is?
Rob Barnes, Barnes.
Yes.
Yeah, the project is the Easy Mission, Easy IE.
IE.
Easy IE.
Wait, oh, EZIE. Yes.
Yeah, that's the name of the NASA mission. And then the magnetometer project itself is called MagPi, because they're using
Easy Mag now. They changed it.
Oh, what is it now, Ruth?
They call it Easy Mag. So they
Easy
renamed it
Mag.
for Mag.
Okay. Okay.
Easy Mag.
It's the Electrojet Zeeman Imaging Explorer. That's what the acronym stands for.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So that-
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Unless anyone has something else they want to add, I guess I've got a list of people and a list of packages, and I'll say it's on me now to, as my Jira ticket says, corral the packages. I'll probably make some kind of like Slack group in the PyHC space to start with. Not super sure how I'll move forward with that, but please, if you are on this list or if you've raised your hand today, start thinking about that, because we have almost a year to do this, but that could slip away from us pretty quickly if we forget about it and don't actually work on it soon. So I'm just trying to make sure that we will actually have the infrastructure to put together this display at test, so I don't make promises that I can't fulfill. You understand me? All right, Rebecca.
Bare minimum, pull an ISWA template that someone at CCMC could build. If everything else fails and life sucks, you could do that.
That's a plan B. If all else fails, do you think they've got enough in there to just show something?
Yes.
Cool. Happy to have a safety net. All right, and with that, I think we're past the half hour, so I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm done here and cede the floor. And this is, yep, that's it. Yes, I'm just screen sharing from that laptop, so if you can put it back on the podium, it should still be sane and operational. Yes, you can. I was going to give that to you. I know.
Oh my gosh, does this still have a CD drive?
Wow, that does have a CD drive. That popped open.
Oh wow.
Surprised the laptop still runs.
Mood. Okay, 1 second. While I refind where everything is. Okay. I'm so not used to Windows. Like, not make that full screen. Where did Chrome go? There we go.
And the presentations is the tab on the far left.
Beautimous, thank you. Yeah.
Might want to refresh the page. I don't know if that's the most up-to-date version.
It is.
Okay, cool.
Okay. How do I just present it? There was just a button before.
Right to the left is the download button. if you're
Thank
looking for
you.
it.
Yeah, let's just do that. That's easier. Freaking Windows. Where does it go? Sorry.
I see the PowerPoint is open.
Oh. Yes.
Maybe we should minimize or something. Probably on your other desktop.
We're gonna get there, y'all. Looks like this. Okay, but first I need to share. I'm getting there. We're gonna make it, y'all. Okay. Probably gonna share that. Yeah. Okay. And then I will share slideshow. Does it look good online? We made it. Thank you for struggling with me. as I
Looks
figure
good
out something else
online.
That's not Mac. Boo hiss. So thank you everyone for the past 2.5 days of this meeting. This is technically the meeting wrap up, although after this presentation gets done, there will still be the hackathon session for anyone interested in sticking around. The room is open until 5. And we can organize exactly how we want to handle that if there's any virtual participation. after I'm done talking. So basically, this is a slide that I show at every meeting, but it'd be great to figure out what we liked about this, first time back in hybrid format. What didn't work so well, what should we do differently? I'll put together a little survey and you can just anonymously respond to it and give thoughts and feedback or what you'd like to see in the future. And as for the next meeting, this was semi-discussion bullet point. So normally we'd have our fall meeting in like the October, November timeframe, but that is also when Dash and Idea is. So I'm wondering if does it still make sense to have a separate PyHC fall meeting, or do we want to combine efforts? What are people's thoughts?
No.
Okay, so there's no. No for which?
Fair point. I think keeping it separate can really protect how much time we have for conversations.
That's true.
And keep it PyHC oriented rather than in the context of other things where what we're trying to work on and build can get lost.
That's fair. If people are willing to do 2 separate meetings, I'm happy to schedule them.
I agree that trying to just mash into a session of Dash doesn't work. Probably do not want to chain either. This business of there's a meeting I was going to be at. Let's do a meeting before that, and then a meeting before that. And it just like the brain melts and pours out. So it might be worth considering, given that we have this. Maybe have a check-in or a social or something there, and maybe consider virtual only this fall.
Yeah, for me, having to travel for a meeting more than like 3 or 4 times a year, I start to get pretty crabby about that.
You don't even want to see the amount I've traveled this year. Okay, all good thoughts. I'll keep that in mind as we plan for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Sean has a comment.
Thank you. Now, do I remember why I was grabbing the mic? Yes, I was going to say, yeah, maybe virtual only would be a simpler thing for people to do, and maybe even like a shorter meeting format, especially if, I mean, do we know what we're talking about for PyHC at Dash yet? Has that been put together at Dash? I mean, I know we're talking about PyHC, but have we like actually like laid out what we're going to be?
John's going to talk about that in just a second.
Okay, cool. So I was just going to suggest if there's overlap there, obviously don't include that as part of the fall meeting, I guess.
For sure, for sure. The only caveat is we probably won't have the next spring meeting because we're probably going to combine it with summer school efforts, because that's a lot of meetings, bigger ones.
Yes, I do agree that we will not have a spring meeting next year because we will have the summer school. But hey, if we have a weird fall meeting and then no spring meeting, it could just be a weird year, you know.
Or we could delay our fall meeting to like February or something and make it a winter meeting.
February is really bad for weather.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Well, if it's virtual though, then that takes away that
Fair point.
concern. Anyway, I'll think more on this. I don't want to ever go back to completely all virtual meetings. It's just sad.
So
Speaking
part of a session that Will and I are co-leading at Dash does include PyHC stuff, but it's not the official thing. I
That I'm aware of
submitted
being
it.
one of the meeting organizers. But
Wait, what?
I'm one of the like organizers for the Dash committee. So
Yeah, I told you about this.
in any case, so I was just like trying to think of what all our upcoming meetings are. Be sure if you're like talking about PyHC or a cool PyHC package, let the community know. Maybe we can join in virtually, support you. I know I'll be talking at a GDC science meeting. Doug Rowland just pinged me about that sometime in the July. I'll go to Goddard for that. So if anyone is in the Goddard area and wants to talk the week of like July 11 to 13, let me know. I know there's the big trio, CEDAR, Shine, Gem, all upcoming. And Sean and I, at least at CEDAR, have a presentation on the last day of that meeting on the Snakes on the Spaceship session.
Quick question. What does GDC stand for?
John, do you remember? Say that again. Geospace Dynamics.
Geospace Dynamics Constellation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was only brought
Yeah,
up to me
it's-
yesterday, so I hadn't memorized that particular.
That's the
acronym
next
yet.
big billion-dollar heliophysics mission. It's largely been figured out what to do, but then the funding somehow is now more in question than it was some months ago, and that's above a lot of people's pay grades to figure out what's going to happen.
Yeah, but they seem very motivated to bring in PyHC and open science, and at least with my conversations with Doug over email so far. So that's exciting. Hopefully this can be the precedent for future missions too.
Yeah, there are multiple funded groups working on tools for GDC. And I don't know if too many of them know about PyHC yet. So connecting with them, they will probably all be at that CDAR meeting, maybe in that session. So you might show up a day earlier too, and then connect with those people and say, hey, what you're doing for GDC, you should try to leverage PyHC. You should try to help build PyHC because it's there for you.
Yeah, I think Sean and I may try to go to CDAR. So
Right. Yeah, no, that GDC, they are trying to develop specific things for analyzing what they're hoping is a lot of new kinds of measurements.
Cool.
So that's definitely an area we could tap into.
Tap in. All right. Moving on, upcoming meetings. There's obviously our normal AGU session. The session proposal was submitted. I forget when, but I'm sure sometime in the next month or two, we'll hear back on if it was accepted, which I would be shocked if it wasn't. It has been every year. So tune in for more news later. There's going to be a PyHC summer school, as I mentioned earlier, since we're thinking biannual cadence sometime next year. And I'll be pinging some people to get together an org committee to start thinking about that and talking about it after this meeting. Yes, Rebecca.
There's also an open science session proposed for AGU that would be nice to partner with.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
There's also an open science session proposed for AGU that would be great to partner into.
Okay, yeah. Can you
It's Ryan and I.
Slack me about it?
Oh, yeah.
Just so I remember.
I'm also realizing that test comes chronologically before the summer school, but is not in this upcoming meetings
Yeah,
list.
you know, I had a bullet on it and it got deleted.
Okay.
I don't know why it got deleted, but it's in my head.
Well, everyone's
I'll
aware
add
that
it.
it's happening, so you know.
Yeah, so there's also tests. Sorry that didn't make it in there. But now there's a
also,
quick,
sorry, there's also the Solar Physics Division meeting, the AAS SPD meeting that's in August, which would be after, it's the week after Shine.
ooh, okay. Post about that in the PyHC Slack. There's so many meetings.
Sure, yes.
Get a better
Yeah,
list.
I know it's hard to keep track of. Yeah.
For real. But thanks for that, Will. John, did you want to do your quick plug for Dash as well? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we are very excited about the DASH meeting because we never had a chance like this to sort of emphasize the broader community, not just the Python community. So PyHC, I think there will be a lot of overlap with people that are working in PyHC also will be at Dash, but it's broader, right? So, but yeah, really looking forward to enhancing the community by giving people a chance to connect and sort of be at, I'll call it our own meeting for the sort of informatics and data science component explicitly. It's not a side part. It's not an afterthought. It's the reason why we're having the meeting. And so getting people connected, getting people energized. We talked about the burnout. This is a place where what you're doing is the main focus of the event. So, next slide. Yeah, this is the first time we've showed this anywhere. We are about to put it up on the website, but these are the session proposals that were accepted and the corresponding session chairs. So moving to all open source in heliophysics with John Niehoff, modern data pipeline strategies, Marcus Hughes, CJU, James Mason, Dan Seaton, optimizing machine learning for space weather modeling, Evangelos, not sure how to say that, Pori, Julie Beavering.
Are the slides updating? I only see this head slide.
Oh, maybe not, because we've moved on to the second
I
to the
see the
one on-
dash session slide.
Yeah, exactly. So online it doesn't update.
It might be yours, Lutz, if, because other people are seeing it.
Okay, it's my connection. All right.
Yeah, and then computational notebooks, Ashley Smith.
There it
Jan
is.
Geisler.
Sorry,
Okay,
it's just-
good. Okay. Advancing data portals, Jenny Newth and Hunter, data access, interfaces and services, Doug Lindholm, interoperability between Python packages. That's the one Rebecca was talking about with Will Barnes, Nabil and Stewart. And then we had some specific one, methods and software tools for forward synthesis and inverting plasma and magnetic information in the solar corona. This will be possibly like as a parallel one with something else. And then cloud computing for heliophysics, Joey Mukherjee from Southwest and San Antonio. So yeah, it's an exciting lineup. We're trying to make it as kind of space filled as possible. Space meaning space for conversation and discussion. We're encouraging session chairs to design their own sessions that involve a lot of interaction and time for discussion. There will be long breaks. It's only a 2.5-day meeting. So and we're just going to see how it goes. The room holds 150 people. If we fill it up, that would be great, but we'll probably have, I'm just making a wild guess, 80 to 100 people, but it's adjacent to the idea meeting, which is the second part of the week. Planning hasn't even really started for that. But you can stay and hear some of the working group activity that's going on internationally to try and coordinate heliophysics data environment issues. And so, yeah, there's the schedule, sessions and posters on day 1. We have an unconference session on day 2. And then day 3, there will be a kind of a summary session. Where do we go from here? And then the optional outing. Haven't nailed that down yet. One option that we've explored is the National Cryptologic Museum, which is super cool and nearby. You can work, if we don't end up going there, it's something you should see sometime if you're in the area. You can work an actual German Enigma machine to encode information. And then they have a second when you can decode it. You can actually use it. You can touch it. And behind it is the machine the Brits tried to use to decode it. So pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, it's sufficiently geeky that I think that would be kind of a fun thing. Whether we can all fit and go, it's kind of a small museum, but it's right next to the NSA. So, don't take the wrong entrance.
There were probably 80 people there. I went there on opening day when they reopened it a year ago.
Okay. Right. So we may try to make a reservation. We're looking into that. The registration fee will be somewhere in the $50 to $100 range. And we have to charge that if we want any kind of food, because you can't do food on the budget. And then there'll be optional lunches. Should be a great meeting. Hope to see a lot of people there.
Thanks, John. All right, I just have one more slide left. That's got a lot of stuff on it, but essentially just polling. I know the slides are online, so you can zoom in closer if you'd like later. But there's just several upcoming telecon ideas. A lot of these I pulled from our own conference topics that we didn't get to, but seem important to hit. There's a couple other things I included in here based on today, like further talks about tests and organizing that. Open sci-fying projects and what that might look like. So we'll have Leah back on soon. Actually already confirmed for our June 5th telecon, 3 weeks from now, not 2 because that's Labor Day. So we're not going to have one. Anyway, so if you have any other ideas or other projects that you think we should be featuring and talking about on our telecons, you're always free to send me an email or a Slack. I'm more than happy to make things happen. And then I just wrote down a couple specific action items I knew Sean and I have. So John Vandergriff and I have been bopping back and forth with an idea of a rotating PyHC technical role that could kind of go through different institutions and not just be, LASP centric. So really get the community involved, help out with some of the efforts that we want to get done. Yeah, and then the next 2 bullet points are my normal tasks as the lead. Sean, you're going to be working further on that test event. we have the common PyHC environment effort that's going on this afternoon in the hackathon. And I want to see you further the PyHC chat capabilities. So keep working on that. As for everyone else, if you've had cool ideas come from this conference, please start working on them. Talk to us in the Slack about what you're doing. Keep efforts alive. And I will open up for comments and questions and everything.
If you succeed in finding another way to do interoperability, please submit to the Dash proposal, the Dash session on that topic. We want to see it.
Yep.
Sorry, what? Just thank everybody who helped organize this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for coming and being so engaged and bringing a bunch of really cool content to talk about. Yeah. So this
Yeah, thanks for a very interesting conference. Thanks for organizing.
Sure thing. I say for those who are interested in doing the hackathon, come back in like 15-ish minutes, or maybe actually if we want to grab lunch, let's do an hour. 45 minutes, an hour? What do people want?
An hour would be
I
good.
like forgot that we have to eat.
Yeah, let's do an hour. Yeah.
Okay, so an hour from now, that will be, who has a clock?
2:50.
2?
It's 12:53 right now our time, so maybe we should come back at 2
2.
p.m.
Yeah,
Mountain.
let's come back at 2. And hackathons.
Yep.
Sorry?
Zoom
Yeah,
will
so we'll
stay
keep the
active.
Zoom active because there may be online participation wanted for hackathons. So, and we'll figure out how to share everything once we come back. So
Maybe we'll throw up a little slide that just says on lunch
that's what I
back at
intend to do.
2 p.m. MT. Yeah.
So
In fact, Julie, I think we have such a slide minimized in the taskbar right there. You could just change the time. There's like 2 or 3 PowerPoints in the
Yeah.
taskbar. Yeah.
Ask ChatGPT to throw up a slide for you and head to lunch.
is it screen sharing at lunch now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. See y'all soon. Bye.
Bye.